Welcome to the Labyrinth. I'm your host, Pratham Padav. My guest today is the one and only Yohan Tengra from Anarchy For Freedom. He is an anarchist, an activist, an investigative journalist, a functional medicine expert, and he's the National Steering Committee member. He's one of the National Steering Committee members of Awaken India Movement. This is his third time on the Labyrinth, and we will be having some very deep discussions on whatever is happening right now. And as always, if you find this podcast useful, do like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and leave your valuable comments down in the comment section. And let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy this one. All right, Johan, welcome to the Labyrinth. I hope you're
Hi,
doing well.
Pratham. I'm doing great, bro. Like it's great to be on again. I always enjoy our conversations and how it tends to go. Because most people kind of go on podcasts and stuff. Their questions are very generic, but since you're kind of researching this stuff yourself as well, I think we tend to get a lot out through these podcasts and like perspectives, deeper perspectives that people really need to know about that don't usually come out in other kind of content. So yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, dude.
Last time when I had you on, I think many of my questions were also generic because I didn't know you that well. This time, I think I know you quite well, so I'll be asking some. I'll be asking some below the belt questions also.
Sure, dude.
Okay.
Go for it, man.
Yeah. This is a very funny question. Funny or maybe serious. For me, it's a very weird question. Okay. Is Yohan Tengra part of controlled opposition?
Yeah, I think I could take this both ways, man. Let's talk about the humor bit first. So, like, look, the way I've seen it in our community, if anyone has a good following and they haven't died yet. So this is what I typically joke around with my friends as well. Like, if you don't want to be controlled opposition, always kind of start making content and make sure your followers are under 10,000. Because if you cross that and then no one kills you, a lot of people will see you as controlled op. So I think that it's really funny as well as it's kind of you can say if you think about it seriously, maybe it's I mean, I don't typically tend to dwell too much on people's opinions and stuff because I kind of have an internal path and I've internalized that. Like I really don't give a shit about what anyone thinks about me, in a very true sense, not in a like people typically say it, but then they ruminate secretly inside on what people think. But personally, through my own journey, with the way I had to pursue it, like I reached that level of mental freedom where I could genuinely, just pursue my path and not care, because I had to push through what I did at a time where no one stood by me. Like whether it was family, whether it was friends, whether it was everything in life just came crumbling down. So when life puts you through things like that, you really have to believe in yourself and pursue your own truth and not really give a damn about what anyone thinks, because that's going to keep changing, right? It's just people's perception. Like people believe something today, they'll believe something else tomorrow when they come to know new things. Or most people have most of their perceptions from a place of ignorance, like they haven't really done their due diligence into dig into something. So yeah, man, like Abhi, this whole question, I'm actually going to do an in-depth video on my channel sometime, maybe today or tomorrow, really going into this with respect to the psychological pitfalls of many people in our movement. Because what I've seen is that people typically have woken up in the last 1-2 years, you can say, and the amount of information people have been exposed to with respect to what's really going on, it's made them with batshit paranoid.
Yeah.
Like and I can relate, because I used to be like that at one point, not as bad as some people are today, but when I just got into it, you can imagine, like, at least people have people to talk to, at least we have communities, at least you have Indians you can discuss this with. When I woke up, it was like, me, my girlfriend, and just like 2 other people, maybe, and they are also not that into it that way. So, I mean, I had this whole paranoid tendency before, because it kind of blows your mind open. You've lived in a world where you've thought like you have a certain perception of certain things, and it's so intense because that's what everyone believes. Like whether it was your school or your college or your friend circle or your family, everyone believes in this one kind of narrative, like this whole mainstream view of everything. And then you get exposed to the fact that most of these things are not outright wrong, but at least there's like a lot of things you aren't being told in almost all subject areas. Like every single subject area I've researched, and I've researched many of them, and my research has been very extensive, covering a wide range of subjects. And I've always found that what the mainstream has peddled, there's always alternate views, and you can say, not even, I wouldn't, it would be demeaning to call them alternate, like just different set of information and facts that are more in alignment with the truth, that aren't really covered, and we almost always sold a kind of a twisted half-truth version of things, outright lies even many times.
I
Right?
think
So that
I think you're being too nice, Johan. If in this question, the people who ask these questions is Yohan Tengra, AIM, and Advocate Oja, part of the controlled opposition. To be honest with you, I think they're just being ungrateful, because when
I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Like
Okay.
I'll actually tell
Okay.
you my feeling. That's why I said I'll start with the more lighter stuff. Then I'll actually tell you what I think about these people. But I said I can relate because I went through a lot of that stuff early on, and this is one of the issues when people get into conspiracies. And I see this as a kind of false dialectic. You can say with the whole scientific materialist atheist dogma, people really go on that whole extreme and just dismiss any kind of evidence about collusion, about human intentions, and how people coordinate and get together to accumulate power and wealth and all of that. And they have a very kind of, you can say, a coincidence theory approach. Like they tend to dismiss everything as random, and and then the other extreme of that is these people, right? Like they're so paranoid, and as I said, I understand that, and this is not an attack on anyone, but because people have kind of been exposed to this whole thing that shit, like so many things have issues in them and so many things are messed up, that they start projecting that it kind of becomes like this really almost borderline schizophrenic tendency where you start to doubt every single thing. Even you can't trust anyone anymore because your beliefs have been shattered. It's kind of like you were mind controlled, and your programming is breaking down, and then you just have this dissociation tendency. And I've studied trauma based mind control, and I know how like victims behave when their programming tends to break down in later stages in life. Like that's a whole other topic, but it leaves you very dissociated. You just can't trust anyone anymore, and you don't really know like what you have a handle on. So to these people, I would say that there are many psychological biases that keep people in here, right? If we were to go through some of them, it's this kind of tendency to really draw loose, we can say, connections between very very loose circumstantial things. Okay, like maybe let's say, I'll tell you the reasons why people think that like I'm a control opposition. Most of the times it's because I have strong disagreement with some of the things that are very very cherished in the conspiracy movement. Like a lot of people believe in flat earth, a lot of people believe viruses don't exist, a lot of people believe in veganism, a lot of people, they have like strong, a lot of people worship Hitler and think he's some kind of angel who like took the Rothschild out of Germany. So I have very strong views against that, against those things. Like I do believe viruses exist and virology is a legitimate science. Of course it's manipulated to like do certain things and take away freedoms and rights in society, which is why the Rockefellers really got into virology and microbiology very early on, because they understood how it could be a vector to like really use a legitimate science in order to be able to expand their control and power. But these are really nuanced perspectives. Like you have to dig into this stuff and you have to be able to think for yourself. Like there's a big tendency in our movement where we've just kind of come out of this mainstream mindset where we were regurgitating facts that we saw on TV or what our parents told us, and now it's like this whole dogma where you're just following a YouTube channel and someone said something and you just follow this guy and you believe what he says and you go out and parrot it without actually putting it through your own logical thinking processes. So that's number one pitfall of why most people think, not just me, but I've seen this stuff happen to people I've respected, because I got into this very early on, and the people who I learned from and who I respected, I always saw there was a section in their alt media community abroad, which started much before ours, that would tend to target them based on these kind of fallacies. So I would really tell people, just because someone disagrees with something you truly believe in, even if it's alternative, it's not a basis to really just dismiss someone. It's a logical fallacy. Like if you really want to counter what I'm saying, address the reasoning and the evidence I'm putting out, and counter that logically. Like counter the points. Don't engage in ad hominem attacks, don't engage in personal attacks, don't engage in character assassinations, like Johan does this and does that and this is his personal life or whatever. All of that is like not even an argument. If you really want to like argue about what I'm saying, you have to address the points I'm making. Like, why do I believe in viruses? Why do I believe in SARS-CoV-2? I have detailed scientific evidence to back it up, and all the nonsense theories around isolation and stuff. Like I've delved deep into it. There's a time I did a video like literally explaining Koch's postulates to people and telling people like why, I didn't openly say it. Even that in my video, I knew that I had to learn so much. I was like, okay, this is something that people should consider, but I'm still not sure, that kind of mindset. But eventually I did figure out, because I do have a background in functional medicine, and I'm pursuing this academically currently as well. So I did dive deep into virology and microbiology and stuff, and I figured out, like, yeah, this is legitimate stuff, and half the people who talk about it don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
And what would you say to someone like, this is going to be controversial again, to someone like BRC who will say that HIV does not exist? You can, HIV was brought just to say, push the sale of whatever, to push the sale of rubber and contraceptives and whatnot. That might be true, but he's saying that HIV does not exist, COVID does not exist.
I'll tell you that the problem, see, man, like I personally think BRC has done good work. Okay. So I don't tend to like, just because I have disagreements with what people are saying, okay, I will never like personally attack them unless they do that to me first. Okay. Firstly, I don't even consider personally attacking nobodies, because half the people who do that don't have any following. And like, if I sit to do that, then I'll just be giving my audience to them, and they don't really matter, like, they're no one. But in case someone who has a following does do that to me, that's the only time I get back. But other than that, just to keep the movement together, I don't tend to really go into the nitty-gritties, or like really talk about, okay, like, I disagree with this fine thing or what this guy is saying. Like, I was just saying this on a like previous video I did as well, which is getting some traction, like India's way out of the new world order. I was talking about this, that if I really had to sit and disagree, like, even the people who are most respected in the movement, like, I could sit and do hours of content on them and tell you, like, why this thing they're saying is misconstrued. And like, I respect most people. I don't think they're doing it out of bad intentions, or they're trying to mislead people. Of course, there are some people like that who I think are doing it because they have, like, a vested interest, or they're in it for the fame or the popularity or whatever. But a lot of people, like, even Mr. Biswaroop, like, I think he's a good guy who's trying to do the right thing. I think that he's wrong about some things, and that's because of the flaws in his thinking processes and how he tends to assess information and all of that. So as far as HIV goes, and I would even say this for veganism, right? Like, I mean, would be the two main areas that I typically tend to disagree with the Indian naturopathic community on, is veganism and this whole idea of virus denial and pure terrain theory. So it's not like I don't believe in the terrain. Like, I personally work at a functional medicine company, and we have a lot of focus on, you can say, understanding how the body really works, figuring out root causes, fixing that. So we're all about, like, working with the terrain. But just because your terrain is messed up doesn't mean the germ is non-existent. Like, if you and in fact, many times it's the germ that makes the terrain weak. Like, maybe you have some kind of you can say leaky gut, like your gut lining is damaged, and then these things start going inside and causing issues for you. So it's a very, very fine line. Like, where does the germ actually start affecting the terrain? And if the terrain is messed up, what is it because of? Like, terrain doesn't get messed up on its own. Most of the times it's like vectors are actually causes, like external causes, that mess up your terrain, and infections are one of them. I would say, like, if anyone actually reads papers on this subject, you will see about, like, how damaging some of these microbes are, like mold and candida and various different kinds of bacterial pathogens. And, like, even, like, if people study Epstein-Barr virus or herpes, you will, like, figure out what these things go and do in the body. And the reasoning with which they dismiss it is something that I've gone into detail. Like, I've done a video with Jeremy Hammond, where we were kind of talking about, he's a medical journalist in America, and I really respect his work, because he's very thorough and cited and stuff. And we really went into great detail with respect to, like, the arguments from the people who really push this idea that viruses and, like, and some people go even further and say that microbes don't exist altogether and stuff, and it's all about the body, and these things can't do anything if your body is healthy and stuff. So, I mean, with respect to the HIV, okay, the whole debate comes down to isolation, right? So these people tend to dismiss the idea of isolation because they want a pure sample, like something that's just taken out of your throat, and then I pass it through a centrifuge and I just put it over there. The whole issue with that is that even if you study how bacteria are isolated, okay, they don't do it that way. Like, most people believe in bacteria, like, most people believe in fungi. If you want to isolate those pathogens also, scientists don't, like, just take your sample and then, like, centrifuge it and, like, bring it down to that whatever microbe you're trying to study. They will always do that centrifugation process, and then they will try to grow the agent they're trying to isolate in a medium. And the same thing is as for viruses. Like, the same, like, if you want to isolate bacteria, you would take that and you would put it in a petri dish with, like, a growth medium, But you would do the same thing for a virus. It's just that the virus is like it's something that can't replicate unless it has host cells. So you have to use a cell line to replicate it, and then you have like so much quantity that you can actually purify and see under electron microscope and sequence it. So I mean, most people haven't really delved deep into virology. Their opinions are very surface level. Even the people who think they read papers, they really misinterpret the papers half the time, or they don't like actually understand like they dismiss things as jargon and technical stuff. But if that's your opinion, like if you read a paper and you think something is jargon or it's too technical, like you don't understand what you're talking about. You need to like go and get your building blocks right so you understand what those terms mean and what they're actually talking about, right? So I see this whole tendency with HIV denial, with like SARS-CoV-2 denial as well, because the narratives are very similar. Like I'll give you an example. So with SARS-CoV-2, like most people are saying, "Arey, लोग खाली hospital में क्यों मरते हैं, घर पे क्यों नहीं मर रहे?" I'm like, I mean, just think about that a little bit more. Like if someone is really suffering, I mean, it's funny and sad at the same time. Like if someone's really suffering and they have some issue at home, do you really think they're going to stay at home, or someone's going to call an ambulance?
I think this is the
No, I mean,
this is the
basic stuff, right?
Yeah, I think this is the cognitive dissonance that many conspiracy theorists are suffering from, that they have decided that, hey, everything the mainstream is saying wrong, even if the mainstream
And that's
media
absolute
says,
bullshit as man. I'll tell you what, like this is another interesting point you brought up that I was discussing with James recently, because I think this has become a bigger problem that I will have to address in more detail sometime, not by doing personal attacks on people or anything, but just putting out my stand in a more kind of upfront way, because I think it's causing a lot of, you can say, I mean, most people are fine, like, but a certain section of the community is getting very, very, you can say, they're going really down the wrong path because of getting too deep into all these rabbit holes. So this is what I was discussing with James as well. Like most people have a tendency that, okay, if the mainstream media says anything, it's fake. And if the alt media says something, it's 100% legit. That's such binary base level thinking. If like there are times when the mainstream media will say something that can be accurate. And there are some times when the alt media people will say something that can be totally delusional. Like I'm pointing out so many things to you that I think are batshit delusional. But you have to really, there's no shortcut to using your brain, man. If I wish it was so easy that you could just look at a source and be like, nahi, ye galat hai, or like sources, and you can say like places where you get information from, you can have certain biases towards them depending on the track record, depending on the credibility, depending on what kind of work they put out and how consistent they've been in putting credible information out. And with that respect, like I would doubt anything that's coming from the mainstream media. Like I have my guards up when I'm reading mainstream media articles, because I know how much they've lied over the years and how much they've twisted facts. It doesn't mean I can just dismiss what they're saying. Like if I have to really go into it, I have to show why it's wrong. Like if I really want to say like this article is peddling fake news or whatever, then I have to go into the facts of the matter and figure it out, right? It's not as easy as isne bola to ye galat hai. So that whole thinking, I mean, there are many cognitive, you can say, pitfalls that way that people really tend to fall into when they get into these kind of research. And of course, like I will be putting out more work to really go through these biases, and I mean how we should tackle them. This is something I think we discussed in the last podcast as well. Like I see a lot of people have this tendency that if they believe in something, and then they tend to you can say like stick on to that and just dismiss anything the other side is saying. But like how I went through my whole process is I would sit and challenge my beliefs. Like I would literally like sit and watch what I believe, and then sit and watch people who say the exact opposite, and that makes your argument stronger. You shouldn't just dismiss something that someone's saying because they disagree with you. You should really go into both sides of the argument. That's how the ancients actually you can say taught how the correct way to learn was. It was through engaging in the trivium process, which is really going through a wide body of information from many different sources, and then analyzing all of that, and then coming to a coherent view based on everything. Otherwise you'll always be caught off guard. Like someone might be saying something that's legit, but because you're so convinced that what you believe is totally true because of whatever 2 months of research you've done online watching videos, you just tend to dismiss that, whereas you don't know like what depth and level of knowledge is actually waiting there for you if you were to go and explore that. Like a lot of people have this tendency to assume knowledge. Okay, like they might read a book or two, or they might watch some long documentary series online, and then they think they know a lot on the subject. But it's typically the people who are, you can say, less researched, or who've actually delved into subject less. They tend to have the loudest opinions. But the people who actually dive into something really deep, it brings a level of humbleness, and it brings a level of, you can say, not being too radical about something, because you can always be wrong about something when you actually get when you get exposed to the depths of knowledge, and you figure out, okay, in this subject, like I could spend a lifetime just pursuing this one subject and I still wouldn't know everything there is to know about that. And then we tend to get so gung-ho about so many things that we're sure that this is 100% right and stuff. So I'm not saying that as a way to dismiss what we're saying. Is just that you should have a mental balance in your mind, that you could be wrong and you should always keep trying to challenge what you're thinking, and it will just make your argument stronger. It's not going to make your argument any weaker. You should explore what the other side is saying. If they're wrong, they're wrong. You'll know the reasons why they're wrong. You'll be able to better debunk them when someone comes and gives you those talking points. In fact, this happens with me a lot of the time. When I'm arguing with someone, I will give them the counterpoint and address it for them before they even give it to me, because I know what they're going to say. So that kind of, when you actually delve that deep, it gives you a big edge when it comes to convincing people and debates and stuff as well, because you already know their mindset and you can kind of break it down for them before they even articulate it.
Yeah. And another place where I get frustrated with these conspiracy theorists is that they put so much effort into saying that all allopathy is wrong. We should never go to hospitals. Yohan Tengra is controlled opposition and blah, blah, blah. I tell them, okay, fine. Why don't you put some effort then? Why don't you go to the court? Why don't you put some, why don't you file a legal case? Why don't you do at least 1% of effort that AIM has done, rather than just calling them controlled opposition? They are not putting in the effort. They're just behaving like crybabies, and that's really frustrating for me now.
No, I'll tell you what. See, most people who tend to shit talk online, or like pick nitty gritties with what someone's doing, their opinions aren't valuable at all. Like if it was, like if I had to actually do this the right way, I would put content out and I would shut my comment section. Not because I care about what anyone thinks, but because there's so much, you can say, garbage, like unnecessary opinion that's in there that really, you can say, makes the content like I don't know, not less valuable as such, but it kind of takes away from the intensity and the depth of the content, when like absolute nobodies who are not doing anything in life, who are not actually going deep into knowledge, who are not actually doing their own work to put it out, have loud opinions and comments about what like exactly everyone should be doing, but they don't want to do absolutely anything, right? So this is another thing. Like I always tell people, if you think I'm doing something that I'm not doing, do it yourself. This is not my obligation. Like I'm not born to do this or something. I made it my responsibility because I understand that it's everyone's responsibility to be doing this, like to be actually, like there's no shortcut to this, dude. Like I always tell people, which is why I'm so big on content creation. Like even my friends know this. I'm always pushing people to like research more and make content, because there's no other way. Like it has to be people going deep and exploring this knowledge and then putting out the right perspective, because we are a programmable species. It's like whatever we put in comes out in real life. So people have put in garbage in their mind all the time since they're born. And if you want to change the human condition, you have to change the human perception first. And to change that, you have to first do the work in like making sure you're up to that level of knowledge where you can put the right content out, and then do it yourself and kind of put that out and change other people's minds. So most people who are in the comment section haven't even started the process. In fact, they think, like I'll tell you, a lot of people who have this mindset, they believe that there's absolutely like no hope in anything. Everything is controlled. Everything's doom and gloom. Nothing's going to happen by anything we do. Okay, if that's your mindset, then like why the hell are you even online? I mean, just go and do your thing, like what are you going to get by even like nitpicking or commenting on people? Okay, so I just say this because their opinions really don't have any value. If I do think, I always appreciate constructive criticism. So and I always understand where that's coming from. Like if someone's genuinely giving constructive criticism, there will be no ad hominem in there. It will just be like, dude, I think this is wrong. I genuinely think that these are the reasons why you're doing something that you could do better or something. And I always appreciate that. But people who come in and like act as naysayers or just like are totally cynical, like it's like whatever you do, nothing's enough. Okay, like look, first people are telling us, I'll just give you an example. Okay, like first people are telling us that your case won't even be listed, because it wasn't being listed actually for the longest time. But then we took efforts to make it get listed. So it's this logical fallacy of moving the goalpost, right? Because there's no point you will actually consider you are wrong about your own position. Okay, like that's the difference between an open-minded person and someone who's like rigidly kind of stuck in dogma. Is that an open-minded person will be open to kind of having their belief challenged on a certain subject. Like if someone believes I'm control opposition, okay, like what level of evidence would convince you I'm not? It's just that question. right? Or if someone believes that what we're doing is wasting people's time, okay, can we do something that will convince you that we're not wasting time? So I'm giving an example of that. So first people thought that, we got the case in. Then the people thought, okay, the judge won't get convinced. The judge got convinced over time. Then the judge actually wrote in the order that's illegal, but then people were like, no, but the mandate is still not taken back. It's still just something written, but the state government are not withdrawn it. Okay, then we filed another case and we got that withdrawn. But now it's like, okay, no, now that's withdrawn, and you guys did this because the health bill is coming. So this is just a way to trick people into kind of having some few months of freedom, and then again, stuff comes back, and we get shut down. So I actually heard this one guy. I'm gonna take his name and make a video on it, because I told you, like, if someone messes with me personally and they're nobody, I don't give a damn. Like, I'm not gonna give my audience to them. I couldn't give two flying fucks about what they think. But if someone has an audience and they will personally attack something I'm doing, like trust, I'm a big believer in self-defense when it comes to physically as well as when it comes to like verbal assaults and stuff. And I'll go into more detail when I do that video. But basically what this guy was saying is that we filed this case because like we wanted to remove the Disaster Management Act, and then because that would get removed, they would come out with an even more stricter bill, and that's why they are proposing this new health bill. And it's because of us. Like, if we didn't do this case, the Disaster Management Act would have stayed, and then this would have never happened. Like, the new health bill would never come. But I mean, it's such ignorance, and I don't even know what to say. Like, firstly, the new health bill, the draft was made in 2017, and it is there to replace the Epidemic Diseases Act. It's not there to replace the Disaster Management Act. Okay, so that's wrong. Like, if it was okay, if we did it and they came out with something right now and made it, even then it's not an argument. But I'm just saying that's not true either. Like, this started in 2017. The draft bill is there from 2017. It was drafted by like two national health bodies, and it's not, like, the Disaster Management Act is not even withdrawn. Like, people don't know what they're talking about half the time. Even the people who have big followings and they're making videos, they just declared it's not a pandemic anymore. The act is not taken back. The act is still there. If they think that there's a pandemic again, they can invoke it again. It's just that the National Disaster Management Authority actually declared that, okay, this doesn't apply to COVID anymore. Like, this is, we're not going to use this act because we think the emergency is over. The act still exists as a legislation. Okay, so it's not because we did this case that the Disaster Management Act is gone. It's not gone anywhere. They've just like revoked it when it comes to application. Okay, but it's still there as a law. Like, they can invoke it anytime. Right? So it's just things like this, man. Like, half the people say stuff and they really don't know what they're talking about.
Who is this guy? What's his name?
Okay, I'll say it. It's Vilas Jagdale.
It's who?
Vilas Jagdale. I don't know if you know him or not.
Okay, the funny thing is people call him a controlled opposition because I believe he changed parties. I think he joined Congress recently. That's so ironic. I can't believe he's calling you controlled opposition because half the conspiracy community is calling him a controlled opposition. do you think
gets back? I'll tell you the mindset. I'll tell you the whole mindset with this whole control op thing. Firstly, I told you it's all about disagreements, right? And people don't understand. This is such a huge field of research. You're gonna have people who can have so many different positions on like so many different topics, right? So if you're just gonna make that your bone of contention, and you think just because this guy is not saying this one thing that I exactly want him to say, like some people are really fanatical about flat earth or virus denial and all, and then if I'm not saying that, like, okay, because I'm not saying that, that's why I'm control opposition, and I already explained why that's logically fallacious and intellectually lazy. If you really want to like address something I'm saying, like, go into the facts and do that. And another reason why this whole control opposition things come is because people give a lot of like incredible amount of weight to circumstantial stuff. Okay, like let's say someone saw my t-shirt with a one eye thing, or someone saw me at a lodge, Freemasonic lodge, and then they will like connect 5 different things. Yohan pushes meat, and like Yohan was seen at a Freemasonic lodge, and Yohan has this one eye t-shirt, and it's just this whole white thing, And of course, see, there's value in connections, and there's value in I'm not going to go in the other extreme as well and say that there's no value in that whatsoever. Like, of course, there's value in circumstantial stuff. This is how we figure conspiracies out. Like, you're never going to get a direct admission from a conspirator that, like, I went and met this guy and we plotted this thing. You're always going to get to know through circumstantial stuff when it comes to understanding people's intentions and people's motives. It's not a hard science that you can actually like figure it out through scientific method. You have to have doubt. Like, this is what police officers do. Police officers are conspiracy theorists. To figure out who committed a crime, they actually have to think about, okay, who passed through that area first? Maybe this guy's a suspect, this guy's a suspect. And then you start going deeper into that. So this is a problem with the skeptics and the atheists, is how they tend to dismiss conspiracies. But the people on the other hand, like the people who get really radicalized with conspiracies, they just make their whole worldview out of that. Like one guy flashed a one eye symbol, so like this guy is sacrificing kids or part of some lodge or something like that. That's equally ridiculous. So it has to be a
I'm a child sacrificer because
yeah.
God, I don't care,
No,
dude.
so I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. So it has to be a balance between both, and this is what I've
Yeah.
always told people. Like, see, if you find circumstances, stuff like that, it's good to generate doubt, and even within the circumstantial sphere, there's a hierarchy of evidence. Like, not all circumstantial evidence is the same either. Like, let's say, I'll give you an example. So triangulation is what gives circumstantial evidence a lot of weight. Like, let's say one person in one corner of the world is describing a certain phenomena, like an anecdote. And then you find like people totally disconnected from that guy who don't know anything about it, who you can vet in their life, have never come across any of that, who never understood anything of that, and they've seen the same thing. So if you kind of have clusters like that, it's called triangulation when it comes. Even intelligence agencies use this technique. Like if you come across the same set of info from totally unconnected sources, it adds a lot of weight to what they're talking about. But so I would say this, like circumstantial evidence is good enough to generate doubt and skepticism towards someone. Like let's say I see some guy in a film or some kind of symbolism or some kind of poet theme, like of course I will get suspicious. Okay, but to confirm like what that guy is doing, I need to look at his actions. Okay, like that's direct evidence. Like let's say, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like let's take Henry Kissinger. Okay, like if Henry Kissinger flashed a one eye symbol and maybe like was a member of Freemasonry, okay, I would be doubtful towards him if I didn't know about anything about his actions. But because he's there, because he flashes the symbols, because he engages in these Freemasonic handshakes or whatever, and then he's doing all this stuff in the world that proves to me, and he's part of these organizations that he funded, and the money trail goes over there, and his actions are confirming what he's doing as a globalist kind of hack. That's the reason I believe Henry Kissinger is evil, not because he flashed some symbol or something.
Exactly.
So there's like you can say there's a spectrum of evidence, right? Like you get surer and surer about some things the more these things add up on themselves. So circumstances there can be other explanations. Okay, I'll give you an example. Like someone could flash a one eye symbol because the photographer told them it's a good thing to do. Like many people in the industry who I know, like it's a common thing. Like they ask them to like flash a symbol or whatever, and they don't even know. Like they're just doing it because the photographer asked them to pose in a certain way, and you are running off thinking that this guy is this and that. I give another example. Like personally, people think like maybe I'm some kind of Illuminati agent because I have that one eye symbol, and then I was in a lodge as well. So I've addressed this also. Like the one eye symbol, it was actually a symbol to represent unity consciousness in the ancient world, which is what the actual adepts who pursue the light mystery traditions in the occult, like portrayed God that way. Because God was all seeing, like God was everywhere. God is like the infinite field of consciousness that connects everything. So that was understood to be everywhere and part kind of like having a look on everyone that way. That's how they depicted God. It was a symbol of unity consciousness. And the triangle also in the one eye, it's actually a way of representing good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Okay, that's the whole process through which occult initiation begins. It's like you get your mindset right, you stop lying to yourself, you pursue the right information, you process it properly emotionally, you feel the emotions that come up, and then you channel that into right action. Like that's the trinity of consciousness. Okay, that's how they actually use the one eye symbol. But then the dark occultists came, and this whole Illuminati cult came, and they hijacked that because they genuinely believe they're God and they want to create their control system on earth thinking that they rule us.
Like they hijacked the swastika.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, man. So it's just like that. So that's what I'm saying. When it comes to symbols, there's a lot of context and a lot of different things that could be going on that people aren't thinking about if they immediately jump to a conclusion. Like if people just research Freemasonry, it is not like every single Freemason is evil. Like this is another thing people in the conspiracy movement need to understand. There's compartments, there's hierarchies. Okay, not everyone who's part of these organizations is some evil hack. I would say even people in India who go and attend, say, World Economic Forum meetings or Bilderberg or Trilateral Commission, like I found many Indians over there. And I don't necessarily think they're evil or they're going there knowing full well like what they're doing. It's just that they are like the managerial class of the global elite. They've been brainwashed in this certain ideology and they genuinely believe in pandemics and climate change and like the way the governments are enforcing it. And they genuinely believe that we need like a centralized point of power in the world to be able to deal with these global problems more effectively because they've been brainwashed. They haven't really, engaged in the entire like independent research process that we have engaged in and actually like spent time and taken time and effort to really go deeper into these subjects and develop their own understanding. But because they are in a position of power and their egos are massaged and they're drawn into these clubs where they're made to feel important, they believe these things not necessarily knowing full well what they're doing. Most of them actually like believe they're doing the right thing, in a way. But that's what I'm saying, it's very compartmentalized. So if someone's a Mason, like most Masons are at the bottom 3 degrees, of Freemasonry as a secret society, and there they don't know absolute shit. Like, it's just a cover for these people to portray that we're doing charity or we're doing some kind of good work, and we're funding like all these NGOs like Lions Club, and we're sponsoring medicines for them and Rotary and all that. So that's what it is at a base level, because of course at the higher level there's coordination going on. Like, I'm not saying that either, that Freemasonry is like positive secret society or something. Definitely not saying that. At the higher level there's a lot of manipulation and cover up and coordination with respect to covering certain bad events that happen in the world up that way. But at the bottom level it's not like that. So people really need to understand compartmentalization of knowledge. Like, it's like if you go into a bank and you talk to a cashier, that guy is not going to know what the bank manager or the CEO knows, right? So it's like you have to understand that, and you can't just think anyone who's part of the Trilateral Commission or World Economic Forum, this guy knows every single thing and he's pushing the conspiracy in full knowledge. It's not like that. And the same thing about me. Like, I went to that Freemasonic lodge because, unlike most people, I started researching this stuff 7 years back in college. And I remember that time I'd read David Icke's book, I'd watched a couple of videos, and I was like, what is Freemasonry? I read bad stuff about it, and I was like, let's go and ask these people. They had an open day. They have an open day every year. You can go and check that out online. They literally like open themselves up to the public. In fact, after the pandemic came, they had a virtual open day. They still kept that going. So it's like they want to portray that, oh, we're not secret anymore. We allow anyone to come in and ask anything they want to. So I went there with my friend, and then my friend landed up coming in this video, and she didn't know anything about this stuff at the time. Like, I mean, we just started kind of like being with each other, and I always speak to her about this stuff, but she didn't really know exactly. Like, she just came to give me company. And then in this video, she's like, yeah, they do good work, they do this charity stuff and all, because she doesn't know much, she's not gonna go out and tell them openly like, oh yeah, you guys like have a very kind of attack-based perspective on them. Like, you guys are trying to brainwash us, but I know what's going on that way. She wasn't there yet. So that's how it tend to came out in the video. And I've not even said a word in that video. I'm literally like just standing there and like looking into the camera. Okay. So it's stuff like that. That's why I'm giving context. Like, just think this is about me. And I'm actually explaining, like, people are connecting these wild dots. It's a mixture of everything. Like, it's a mixture of seeing symbols and like seeing me in the lodge, and then thinking that, okay, this guy also has bad positions. Like, he thinks viruses exist. He thinks meat eating is a good thing. And then they're so convinced on these positions, plus they see all the circumstances stuff, they club everything together and be like this. So I'm explaining their mindset to you. And I'm also explaining, like, I think I've explained in detail why that mindset is problematic and how we can really go about it, not just with people in our community, but I think also with people outside who we are analyzing and like who we are saying are conspirators and stuff. That you have to keep these nuances in mind. You can't be too fundamentalist about it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I had an experience with Freemasonry. I almost joined the Freemasonry a few years ago.
Okay.
For the same reason, okay, because everyone was saying Freemasonry is a secret society. I thought, oh, cool, I want to join a secret society. Freemasons are powerful and they're running the world. Oh, okay, I want to become powerful. So I thought of joining the Freemasonry. I contacted the head of Freemasonry here in Mangalore, but then I realized, okay, this maybe I shouldn't, and I just backed off. Okay, but talking to the local Freemasons, it felt like these people don't know anything. I don't think these people are evil people. These people are not Klaus Schwab, or they have no idea what's happening. And even with regards to pictures like this, Bharatanatyam dancers do this. I mean, they're all not part of the Illuminati. You will find so many family pictures of young kids doing this. This doesn't mean that they're all part of World Economic Forum. So people have to apply their own brain instead of randomly coming to the conclusion. But
no, I'll tell you one more thing about that whole symbolism thing. Okay, so I've studied symbolism in great detail, and if you have a triangulation of symbolism come up, like, okay, if I'm watching a music video which is about like a trauma-based mind control programming, this is very widespread in the industry. A lot of people in the entertainment industry are actually put through like not necessarily CIA, MK Ultra, but projects like that where they go through mind control and stuff, which is why a lot of celebrities tend to break down later in life, and their programming kind of tends to dissociate. So basically, like, they put through intense trauma in order to split their personalities, and then there's a lot of programming and stuff goes in there. So they have like this split personality disorder that's induced by subjecting them to trauma in their earlier years. And these people tend to get off of it, like the dark occultists and stuff who are connected with Hollywood. They will typically put these things out in themes and movies. And I mean, I can give you many examples and detailed articles exactly going through the symbolism in the movies and the scripts. But for that, you have to have a detailed understanding of symbolism. It's not just based on the one eye, but symbols, like more specific symbols. Like if I see butterflies flash up with more, you can say like all the symbolism line up, like there's butterflies, there's one eye symbol, there's many other symbols that way. And it's a coherent story. Like the music video, I've seen many music videos where they're actually taking into the process of how this girl got into mind control, how she disassociates, and then when she disassociates, like this butterfly symbols come up, because butterflies are a symbol of transformation in the dark occult. Like they actually use that butterfly symbolism to portray that there's kind of like this shift going on. The person is transforming, in certain way in their mind that way. So I mean, people have to have a detailed understanding of symbolism as well to really dig into this. And there are credible researchers who do this. Like I would recommend people who really want to research symbolism. They can check out Mark Passio's work on symbolism, David Icke's work. David Icke is one of the best people on symbolism that I've come across. There's vigilantcitizen.com that's really dedicated to decoding symbolism in Hollywood and media and entertainment and stuff. And they're very, very legitimate because their research is highly, highly detailed, and they've studied a lot of literature when it comes to this, as well as Jay Dyer, like Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2. Those are great books for decoding like symbolism and themes in film and stuff. So there are legitimate sources, okay, to like really dig into this stuff and to figure it out, not watching some, like nobody online spouting of their opinion when they have like opinions. People have to understand this as well. Okay, not everyone's opinion is the same. Someone who has put in time and effort are the spiritual currencies of our world. Okay, like of course we have money as a physical energy to transfer whatever energy output we're putting out, but time and energy are like the attention. Time and attention are the real spiritual currencies. And that's how we really gain gnosis, and you can say like spiritual upliftment is when we put our attention and focus into deepening our knowledge base in a certain area, and to actually get closer to the truth, because that's what God is all about. Like God is just another name for truth discovery. Like God is that which is, it's the universe, it's everything that's happened. So the more you get closer to that, the more you get in alignment with that truth. So that is what like people have to pursue in great detail, and which is why people who pursue that and actually put that time and attention across and investigate a certain subject in detail and read a lot of literature on the subject and explore many different kinds of content and then come to conclusions, their opinions are way, 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 way more valuable than someone who's done like who's just coming off of it or who spent little time. People really have to understand that, not this whole new age idea that all opinions are the same, everything's relative, there's no absolute truth. That all of this is like mind control to really stop people from getting closer to the truth. There is truth. Okay, our job is to align our perception with truth, and the more time and effort you put into it, and the more you investigate things, and the more you've researched, the better valued your opinion is compared to just an absolute nobody.
Okay, you've spoken many times about the structure of the Illuminati, Rothschilds, Rockefeller, Bilderberg Group, Club of Rome, etc. But really, who's on top? Who's running the world?
I mean, yeah, I see. I've not really gone into this in detail because it's something I wanted to come to after really covering the year and now the spice and stuff. But my metaphysical views are, I mean, are highly, you can say, controversial to say the least. Okay, especially if someone just approaching this for a normie, definitely. But even in our community, a lot of people don't really get these depths that they are. And I would just say this, right? Like, don't dismiss something that sounds you can say whack. Like I wouldn't dismiss flat earth theory just because it sounded whack to me. No idea ever sounds whack to me. Okay, like whether that's flat earth or wide, I always consider things that this could be true. No idea is too whack to be true. Okay, like our world is that messed up and reality works in a totally different way compared to how people typically perceive it. That a lot of people, what they think is not possible is actually quite possible once you really understand how the world works and how the building blocks of nature work, right? So I'm not saying this. People might think that okay, Johan believes in like non-human entities and stuff. So on what basis is he dismissing like flat Earth and all this stuff? Because that's equally whack as this.
Yeah.
But I have genuinely considered flat Earth as a possibility. I spent a lot of time researching that and then came to my opinion that it's not true. I heard a lot of debates on the subject and then convinced myself. Similarly for the whole terrain thing, like I spent a lot of time researching all the beloved darlings of the terrain theory kind of ideology, like Andrew Kaufman and Thomas Corwin, and like all these people like Stefan Lanka and all that. And after researching them and like seeing the counter arguments, like I was convinced, okay, this is not true. And I trust me, I've done the same thing for my non-human research, for my like the same rigor with which I put things out, and I have strong opinions. Like I have subjected the same to my beliefs on spirituality, to my non-human views. So I mean, the counterpart of that would be listening to people who are you can say, on the end of pushing these theories and then listening to skeptics as well, right? Because that's how you tend to balance that. So I've spent a lot of time researching atheism, scientific materialism, pure skepticism, materialism, as well as I've spent a lot of time researching the evidence that exists to show that we're really living in a non-material world, that reality is actually holographic. We're living in some kind of computer simulation. It's like a sophisticated computer game, you can say, where you have this cosmic Wi-Fi, which is like the electromagnetic level of reality, and our bodies are the computers, like similar to how this laptop works right now, right? Like there's Wi-Fi all over this room, but I can't really see it through my senses. Is because I have a decoding device that can take the information and the information contained in these waveform fields of the Wi-Fi and actually convert it into Pratham on the screen out here. Like you are here in the Wi-Fi in this room. It's just that I can't see you in this form. I need a decoding device to actually get you on the screen out here and see you that way, right? So that this is how, like from my understanding of the nature of reality, this is how reality works, and it's technology is mimicking that, because our reality is like that. It's like technology is catching up with reality, which is why virtual reality and stuff is getting very similar to, like, you can't even differentiate what's virtual reality and what's normal reality anymore. And what is virtual reality tech doing? It's really feeding information signals into our brain that's like convincing us that, okay, there's this real world, but actually it's just like information signals, right? And that's exactly what I'm suggesting about reality as well. And this is not just a theory. There's a lot of scientists who really expunged on the holographic universe theory, and really going into quantum physics backs this up in a deep way as well, if you really go into it. So that's my perspective on these things, and I kind of have researched a lot of information, you can say credible information, from a very scientific perspective as well, when it comes to evidence of non-human phenomena and the afterlife, like near-death experience research, where they've conducted clinical trials in hospital settings on people who've had these outer body experiences, where they really report, like, okay, what they see outside when they exit the body, and what kind of experience that is. And this is just a summary I would like to give people on that, is that when our body is really you can say a vehicle for our consciousness to experience this particular reality, and once this ends, okay, it's not the consciousness that ends, okay, it's just the physical body computer that degrades. But once your consciousness exits, you have like you can experience reality in a totally different way. Like if you read people's experiences, the entire linearity of time collapses, places, like being able to comprehend multiple things simultaneously. It's kind of like everything's going on in the same moment. We don't have this linear kind of progression that we would have with respect to, say, a DVD. Like you can just think about DVD. The entire thing from start to finish exists in that one moment, but it's just placed like that. So if you put it on in a computer or a DVD kind of decoding device and see it, you'll get the illusion that it's going from like one place and it's progressing through time, but everything just exists on that one CD at that point. And it's kind of similar with the time and the universe as well. So there's a lot of credible research that's available. I mean, I can recommend resources like Skeptico, as well as I've curated a lot of books on this subject of frontier science with respect to psychic research, with respect to consciousness itself, and all these different kinds of areas. And there's a lot of material to pursue on that, and a lot of credible people to pursue. Of course, there's quacks and people like that in anything that you will pursue, right? But the job of genuine truth seekers is to figure out like fact from fiction to really, and there's no shortcut to that, as I said. Like no one can just give you the truth on a silver platter like after being born. You really have to go and earn your perceptions that way. So with that, I would say that with that context, like through my research, I feel that like at the like highest levels of this power pyramid, it's actually non-human forces in a different dimension that are really running this game. And this is one of the reasons why you can see the kind of extent of Satanism and pedophilia among the highest levels of the power pyramid. This is, I mean, you can just keep the non-human thing aside for a while, but if you just look at the bloodline families, and you see the evidence from survivors, from people who've been part of these families, from many different sources, like kids who attended satanic rituals and describe what they've seen over there that way, and the ancient world, and how this phenomenon used to go out in the past, and the evidence that's come out about political pedophile scandals and Epstein and all this stuff. If you really investigate, there's very credible information. Like I would recommend Sean Stone's documentary Best Kept Secret. It's a 5-part thing where he really goes into great detail about all the satanic and pedophile scandals that have happened out in the open. There is many cases abroad as well as out here in Australia and Belgium, where these scandals have leaked, and like very high profile people have been involved in that, right? So why are they after children? Why are they after sacrifices? people have to think about these things. Okay, these are uncomfortable things. When I really got into this research and I came across this evidence, I think I spent a good 1 month being depressed, like just lying, in bed all day, because it's really difficult to go through that pain about like what a child or someone could have experienced on the receiving end. And the more you get convinced of it, the more scary it is, because it could be your child, it could be anyone else who's in the world. It's just, this thing is going on right now. It's a serious issue. Like children are dying and being sacrificed on certain days in the calendar which are very sacred to the elite, where they conduct these mass ritual sacrifices and stuff. So yeah, what is the question, man? I think
sorry. From this, I want to ask, like, what do they get from killing and fucking kill children?
Yeah, so that's what I was getting to. So actually, the people who are conducting these rituals, they are possessed. Either they have like entity attachment, or they have some kind of consciousness that's taken over them. And this is a very real phenomena. This is why when people tend to go into low vibrational states of consciousness, like people tend to have addictions when it comes to drinking, or they tend to get addicted to drugs, like bad drugs and stuff. Of course, there's a whole difference between drugs and psychedelic compounds as well, and like how we can use them and why the setting matters. So I'm not dismissing all drugs as this one broad thing, because that's another reason like why people think I'm controlled op, is because I have like a pro psychedelic position, and like I'm against hard drugs. But that, again, that's also on my principles, that I don't think these things should be banned, because I believe in individual liberty, and I believe that people have the right to do whatever the hell they want to them, as long as they're not harming anyone else. And that includes bad things, right? That includes harming the body, that includes mentally torturing yourself, that includes whatever the hell you want to do, because it's your experience. Like, this is a free will experiment. You were created by the universal consciousness that's split into you to be able to have your experience and to learn your mistakes and grow through lifetimes as your soul evolves that way. So that's the same thing. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, man. Like, okay, yeah, you were talking about like why they're doing this, right? So if you actually see how these people work, most of these people are possessed, and they are being driven by these entities to really conduct these sacrifices, so that they can summon these entities in the ritual. And exactly when that terror period is going on before they commit the sacrifice, there's an entity that's attached to them, that's really feeding on the energy, which is why they're even into anal sex so much with children. And they want the children, because when the hormonal shift happens, okay, when children hit puberty, there's an energetic shift that happens as well, which makes a child, you can say, more impure spirit from a spiritual perspective. Like the light that's there in the auric field kind of tends to get suppressed, and that whole ball of light tends to get diminished once children pass that period. And these people are going for that. Like they want that energy. Like if you study the Gnostic sources, as well as many different kinds of spiritual content that have written more on these occult phenomena, they really talk about how there's this non-human force that's described in the same way across cultures. Like you can pick it up in the Christian tradition with the demons. The Gnostics called these people the archons. If you research the African continent, they have their own word for it. They call these entities the Chitauri, or the serpent beings. If you research like Central American sources, you will see that consistently across cultures which have been disconnected, which couldn't communicate at the time, and you research their ancient texts, they have described these entities in the same way. In fact, the Gnostic texts are one of the best evidence, because they were found in a sealed jar that was buried around 1000 AD. Okay, and they found these in 1945 in Nag Hammadi in Egypt. And when people actually translated them and put that whole thing together, these Gnostics were describing reptilian and gray entities, which are the primary, you can say, holographic form in this reality that this malevolent level of consciousness takes. That's really behind this whole agenda of enslaving human consciousness. That's kind of the text in which they describe these reptilian and gray entities 1000 years back. And if you see the research now, you can find a wide variety of sources that didn't know anything about the Gnostic texts, that are talking about the same phenomenon today. Like people who've been, you can say, part of secret space programs or black budget, covert operations, classified projects. Okay, all this stuff exists, especially within the US government. Like many programs are funded without Congress or anyone knowing about them. Like they're sanctioned directly from the deep state military and stuff. Okay, so you can triangulate these things. You can look at the ancient world, you can look at modern phenomena, and everything kind of comes together. But you have to really go into that and do your research yourself, right? So that's what I was saying, that these texts really describe the archons as well, like this kind of force, this malevolent force that really is behind this whole thing, and that's created like a virtual reality simulation for us that we're currently experiencing. And these texts also talk about how these beings actually keep us humans in low vibrational states, like of fear, anxiety, depression, anger. And see, this is not me saying that all these states are bad. There's a point at which everything that comes up needs to be processed. Like if I'm feeling angry after reading about my loss of freedom or my liberty or satanic ritual abuse or whatever, this whole new age idea that we're not supposed to feel these emotions because they're negative and we're supposed to stay, but like that's absolute mind control. The Satanists put this stuff out there through the new age movement to actually brainwash people into not looking into this stuff, right? But these are again like pitfalls, like this whole avoidance of negative emotions. Every emotion has a reason, and we need to like process that and actually integrate that when we feel that. But the archons actually have created a society through their puppet bloodline families that have controlled this whole system, wherein they've structured society in such a way where they've controlled the sources of education, as well as they have infiltrated almost every single area of life. And they've made it in such a way that humanity by default, especially through the banking system and how much it impoverishes people and really saps money from them and harvests people's energy. It's like people have to keep working their whole life, have to keep working endless hours just to make ends meet. And this system is not by accident. Okay, whatever we're seeing in the physical world, everything I've described with respect to the banking system manipulation, how the political system is set up, about government, and like how all these laws are passed, all of that is really a masterminded plan by dark occult forces who really understand this knowledge that I'm talking about. And they are doing it in, I mean, full intention of really achieving that purpose, that in a mass default state there is war, there is suffering, there's chaos, people are constantly stuck in issues and these emotions. And this is exactly what these we can say malevolent states of consciousness feed on. And they've structured society in such a way for that. So the reason I said that is because in the rituals itself, they after this energy of children, really, by putting them through that torture and terror and stuff. So that's one of the reasons why these people do it.
Okay. Where did they come from, these shape-shifting reptilians?
Okay, so shape shifting is another thing that I didn't touch on. I was just talking about non-human phenomena in general. So you can say that, like, as far as the race goes, like these entities exist. The universe is really vast, and like across the vastness of the universe as well as the multiverse, like you have many different kinds of races. Like you can just think about the diversity on our planet itself with respect to one race. Like we have so much variation with the Chinese, with the, you can say, the Europeans, the Indians and stuff. There's so much variation within that, and we have multiple different species on our planet. So if you just extrapolate that, it's not even a hypothesis. I'm saying that just in terms of possibility, the idea that the vastness of the universe is just us as an intelligent species, it's very, very improbable. But if you just, that possibility combined with the evidence of like this phenomena actually existing, it's not just that the possibility is there. Like many things are possible, right, or likely, but doesn't mean automatically we can say that they're legit. So I'm saying that possibility and the likelihood of that combined with actually evidence of this phenomena existing, for which people would have to do the research. And I will get to this content more in due course. Like, of course, we're having a candid conversation here, so I'm telling you my views openly about it. But this is something that I will cover in more detail as time passes, because I think that these things are equally important for people to understand, so that we can like fight from a larger holistic perspective and not really be stuck in any kind of mind traps or limitations of belief when it really comes to figuring the truth out. So I mean, every single form of consciousness, like you asked where these beings really came from, and I mean, these are just holographic manifestations of you can say the infinite field of consciousness that really split into itself. Okay, so it's like you can think of the universe starting with just a field of potential, okay, a field of all possibility. And then for it to manifest, you have to get inside the experiment. Like you can be in that state of just all possibility, but in order to have experience, you actually have to say take physical form somewhere, right? Otherwise you won't have an experience, you just be a state of consciousness. So this is how I believe that this whole thing started, is just thought and intention. When it's put like into manifestation, it channels into action. Like it's just how we manifest in this reality itself. We come up with something, like Pratham came up with a thought, right? But this is a very dense level of reality. You can't just create by thinking. You have to actually think and then put right action into channeling and manifesting what you want. Like you, of course, but the intention has to come first. Like Pratham has to delve into this information. He has to have the intention, the openness, then put his time and effort into doing that, and then probably manifesting, right? So the same thing for me. Like everything I wanted to manifest with this movement and whatever's going on, like I always conceptualize it first. Like whenever I was going through my initial awakening years and doing research, like I spent just 5 years just reading books and watching videos like 8 to 10 hours a day, which is why I can just go off like this on any topic without really having to have notes or preparing for any show, because all of this stuff is like just crammed in my head, because I spent so much time into investigating that. But again, like I had all these conceptions and ideas about what I wanted to do, but you have to be willing to be practical. You have to actually make legitimate plans, like short-term plans, mid-term plans, long-term plans, and then put your thought and focus and action all together in order to manifest. And trust me, when you do that, things you thought were impossible tend to happen. And it's not through this whole new age idea of just secret, like you just sit and like do journaling or like
Meditate,
have
yeah.
positive affirmations and stuff. It does not work like that. Of course, you have to have that, but you have to be willing to take the practical steps to make it happen. And trust me, when you do that whole process of right thought, right emotion, right action, like stuff happens that you thought you could never manifest that way. So yeah, I mean that's how the universe really, I would say, came into being. It's through that whole process, but you can say in a much more direct form. Like in this reality, we really have to put that much effort into manifesting our thoughts, but on a, you can say, consciousness level, that way, like things tend to manifest when you have thoughts and intentions. So that's how these beings really came to be. That's how all consciousness came to be, right? It's just I mean, evolution does exist. It's true that evolution exists, but I believe in microevolution. Like, of course, adaptations to our environment. Like if you're in a certain environment, and you can say a genetic line passes through that repeatedly through life cycles, like according to the conditions, your genes will tweak. But doesn't mean that everything was an accident and we're just to come from monkeys or something. Like there's a lot of evidence for, you can say, non-human intervention in like these jumps we see in evolution. Okay, they're not random. Like you can research a cosmic history. There's sources on this as well with respect to how this how this place in the universe was really created, and how we are really a product of, you can say, of course, original consciousness, like creating humanity as a species, but then also these entities coming and tinkering with our genetics. And I give you more examples of this. So why do people think that these biases are kept in our mind to stop us getting to the truth? Okay, like these are deep epiphanies that I got, like pursuing my research. I did see the evidence for this tinkering that took place, like these being this race, because it's so technologically advanced and because it's so, you can say, genetically superior and very highly intellectual. Like these are reptilians. These reptilian beings are, at least the malevolent forces of these beings that are really like behind this whole thing. They are highly intellectual and a highly technologically advanced species, and they do have the ability to genetically like be able to manipulate species. Like we are doing it now at our current level of progress in technology and science. Like we are being able to do it to smaller animals. Like I've studied certain experiments from Russia where they were able to change, I think, frog embryos to salamander embryos just by transmitting waveform. Like not even doing actual like CRISPR or something like that. Like just by transferring information signals, they were able to change the embryo, the DNA structure. So if we have this at this level, you can just think for a species that started maybe a million years before us, and they have that kind of edge, like where they could be in the technological advancement, right? Like this is why UFO phenomena and stuff is able to work, because they have access to free energy. Like they've actually tapped into the 0 point potential of the universe, and they're able to extract energy out of that. Like this is another field of research that people can look into, which Tesla was on, and which many inventors have been on, and their work has been suppressed. And good documentaries like Thrive and Thrive 2 have brought out these inventors at their own personal risk, who have working devices today, but they're not seeing the light of day because of government, because government is slavery. Like that's how everything fits together. Like all of these things come together that way. It's because of government that we're not having an unleashing in these technologies. But that's just a tangent. Like I was saying, this is why these beings are able to travel and have UFO craft and stuff, because they're not using fuel or fossil fuels. Like they've evolved to a point where they have access to a source of energy that's there. And this doesn't violate the second or third law of thermodynamics as well. Like we could do another podcast just on that, but I'm just kind of touching, like when people think about these concepts, they have these things because they've been kind of put through that. But there are scientists and mathematicians who are working on a more, you can say, unified field theory, where they're going like, you can say, ahead of Einstein, and really putting together a coherent scientific view and a mathematical view of how the universe really works. When you integrate consciousness into that whole dynamic and not just look at it as a purely material phenomenon. There are mathematicians and cutting edge groups like the Resonance Science Foundation, that's working on all this stuff as well. So yeah, I mean, this is a highly technologically advanced race. They have a lot of intellect, but they're very spiritually less developed. And this is how they played a role in our genetic manipulation. And one of the epiphanies that struck me as well is they put a lot of stuff, you can say, they were responsible for making our reptilian brain larger. Like they've put a lot of stuff in our body programming through which we really stay away from truth seeking. If you just go and research the amount of cognitive biases and logical fallacies people can fall for when researching something, this is not by accident. Okay, like if you can say, if I was a creator and I wanted to create my own experiment, would I create a race wherein, like, if these people tried to pursue the truth, there would be information signals inside the body and chemical reactions that were making it physically uncomfortable for doing that. Like, that's exactly what cognitive dissonance is, right? And it's no accident. That's the only thing I'm telling you. Like, when you study these mind traps, okay, like cherry picking, cognitive dissonance, Stockholm syndrome, all these psychological biases that really stop people from getting closer to the truth. Okay, they're there and they create physical disturbance. Like, if you have a strong belief and I challenge that, this is typically like, why do you think most people are born Muslim or born Hindu? It's because they're programmed. We're a programmable species. Whatever you put inside the mind is what is going to come out in terms of action and output, which is why it's so important, again, to, like, for us to really put the right ideas out, because that's exactly how humanity works. Is if you get the right stuff in, they will put the right stuff out that way. But you can see it's because of so much programming that the elite have like engaged in. You can see, even this is why the Rockefellers took over the education system. This is why they place so much emphasis on censorship and programming, because it's all about what goes inside. That's the thing that results in output. And they've made it even more difficult, you can say, from a metaphysical level, with how they tinkered with our race, with respect to how they put these traps in us. Because when I research something, and as I said, if I was a positive creative force, okay, like, I would want that being, that my fragment of my creation, to be able to excel and go into truth, because truth is what it is, right? It's just the reality of the situation. Like, truth is that which is. That's the simple definition of truth. And if a person or a species wants to get closer to truth, it should be able to change its beliefs in line with what new evidence comes up. And this is exactly like stuff that's inside our bodies that makes it uncomfortable for us to really go into that in a deep way, because there's all this stuff that comes up when you try to challenge your own beliefs. Like, it's uncomfortable, man. Like, if I've got a knack of it, because I've done this process for a long time and I've expanded my consciousness and I have integrated that into my being. But a lot of these people right now, especially because we're talking about the control opposition thing earlier, is because they have such radical beliefs, and anything you say, like, just challenges them and makes them feel uncomfortable. That's why they can't get closer to truth, because they're stuck in a mind trap. It's like a cul-de-sac of belief that way. So this, I mean, it's just like these things have dropped for me that way, with respect to, like, how these beings really engineered us in order to really keep us stuck in the system and not to be able to expand our consciousness. And this is one of the reasons why psychedelics have been banned as well, is because they really keep you in these loops. And psychedelics do tend to open your mind. They of course have pitfalls. They can be used in bad ways, and many people do tend to mess their lives up using them if they're not doing the right thing. But there's a way to do it as well. Yeah.
So is there any is there any hope? Because see, if our enemy is described as someone like Punawala or Klaus Schwab, a human being, assuming Klaus Schwab is a human being, we can protest, we can file legal cases, we could wage a war. But these reptilians with superhuman powers, who have godlike powers, it seems like we don't even stand a chance. Why even fight?
Okay, yeah, I'll clear that up. If this species could invade and take over, they would have done it a long time back. Just think about that. Like, what they've done is, if you just understand the nature of these beings, they can't physically manifest in this reality for a long time. Okay, they kind of have to expend a certain amount of energy to be able to come in here, because this reality is organic. It's the original creative reality. And this is what they've been trying to do through their puppet bloodline and the entire network for many, many different years, is to transform this reality so that eventually they can incarnate once they have the new world order, and once the world is so disrupted in terms of the kind of environment that exists. Which is why the nuclear radiation spills, all this increase in EMF, all the toxicity that's really going out in the environment, is there to change it to a point energetically where these beings can directly manifest. But they couldn't manifest all this while. If it was that kind of mindset, that these are all powerful beings that could just take over and enslave us, they would have done it a long time ago. But it's because they can't do that, and it's because they're so tiny in number, they're really scared of exposure. Okay, like, even if you see ancient accounts of people who had experiences with these beings, and the bearers of knowledge who've really preserved these things through positive secret societies and stuff, and actually had to create their own secret societies to be able to keep this knowledge away from these beings who wanted to, and their representatives who wanted to come in and take it out of circulation. The people who depicted them were scared of depicted them in the right way, because these entities would actually go out and, like, annihilate people who would actually depict them in the correct way as they were, because they were really scared of being exposed, because their numbers are very tiny. Okay, they're not like a infinite intergalactic race with, like, millions of beings over there. It's a very tiny kind of set of entities in that particular race. Even all, not all reptilians are bad. Okay, so it's like all humans. We have a certain hierarchy that's really psychopathic and wants to enslave. And especially with the reptilians also, they have their own hierarchy, like the Draco reptilians and like different kinds of structures and beings. This has been described in many different sources that way. So they can't just come and take over. They're not all powerful. Of course, they have access to advanced tech, but they have to, you can say, convince us into us going along with this, which is why they've really put all this time. They've been around, you can imagine, since a very, very long time, like thousands of years they've been around on this planet. But they've had to take humanity through this process where they've advanced us enough intellectually, where they've programmed us, where they've brought us through the ages of believing in religion and having wars with kingdoms and stuff, and then going through the industrial age and coming across the entire like scientific revolution and like coming into democracy. All this stuff and the industrial developments and the technological developments have been a step-by-step thing, because they can't create. Okay, this is another thing to understand esoterically, is that these forces really had the creative ability sapped for them. So as a species, we are highly powerful spiritually. Like we have an edge with them over that. So we can actually create, which is why like our thoughts, our creativity, our intentions are so important, which is why we can change things in the world. Not everything's a lost cause. You know, we are like creator gods. You know, we're connected with that infinite creative potential that actually sprang this whole thing into creation. And these people have been cut off from that because they chose the wrong path, because they totally got twisted and wanted to take away everyone's free will and save whatever species they come across. Right? That's their psychopathic state. So because of that, they've been cut off the. It's not a person or a being. It's an infinite field of consciousness that you get disconnected from if you totally go away from that, and you lose that creative potential. Right? So they had this ability taken away from them, which is why if you give them a blank sheet, they wouldn't be able to create. Like we can actually create on a blank sheet by coming up with creativity. They've had to put all this effort to systems into us so that they could get us up to a point where we build our own prison. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Okay, they're not doing it in full knowledge. Which is why I spoke about compartmentalization earlier. Like most of these people have been programmed in a certain way that they think they're doing the right thing, but they don't realize they're building their own prison and they're enslaving their own kids. It's because they have the wrong programming put in there. So through the representatives, these beings have had to program us to get us up to a point where now they can usher in the singularity. Because just imagine this: if you gave microchips to people 100 years back, like people would never take it, but it's so alien. But if you can slowly, step by step, in a controlled way, bring a species up to a point where you do that, right? And then you introduce it at the right time. Like this is why if you see when it comes to technology, most technology actually is developed in underground basis where there's a lot of interaction going on between the extraterrestrial beings and their like human hierarchy. Okay, there's many like kind of underground bases you can say where this and people can go and dig into. Okay, but this technology exists way beforehand. And on the human level also, if you see, the military actually uses most of this tech before it comes into the civilian space. Like if you see with respect to search engines, like the defense department actually developed the search engine first and then Google came out. Can Google also has connections with the kind of defense department in America and intelligence agencies and stuff. You can see the same thing for many different Silicon Valley companies and tech giants as well. So this technology is kind of being given to us like a slow drip. It's like you get people at step one, you get people addicted to phones, then you go on the body, then you go inside the body, so that you have like this progression. People think this is evolution. You think you're kind of evolving, which is why if you listen to a lot of futurists from Silicon Valley and stuff, they often talk about like, okay, this transhumanist thing is just like the next stage in evolution. This is how we're going to go, and we're going to extend our minds into the cloud. And the sales pitch is there, right? Like we'll be able to download books, and we'll be able to cybernetically communicate with anyone telepathically. But they don't tell you about the entire spiritual context, and of course, what the spiritual implications of this are. Because what these entities are really trying to do is they're trying to build this transhumanist nightmare where they can trap all our consciousness. Like they don't want people to die; they want people to be stuck in this realm, and even like it's just basically like an infinite kind of hellhole forever. Like you won't be able to die. Your consciousness and your soul will be stuck here. Your mind won't be your own. All your thoughts and perceptions are coming from AI. Like it'll be like a Borg kind of reality. It's like all these individual units, but all our minds are kind of being driven by this archontic force. Like you can say this force, this evil, malevolent force in the spiritual realms I'm talking about. is wanting to manifest in this reality through that level of AI that really takes over people's consciousness. And it will start as us connecting our brains and being able to do that stuff. But if you read people like Kurzweil from Silicon Valley, the Google executive, he talks about this super kind of consciousness where at one point, like the human component will be so diminished and AI like will totally take over the mind. Right. So that's where we are going, and that's how this whole force is really working. If it was that easy for them to take over, they already would have, but they're not all powerful. They're very scared of exposure and they're very tiny in number and they can't create, which is why they have to do it through us. And the minute we understand, like, see, I mean, I'm just giving a basic introduction to this knowledge, right? Like, as I said, like, if you really want to own your perception and you really want to advance the path, you have to get into this stuff and really go into it yourself. Like, it's a different thing. Another researcher is telling you his opinions, but I have done my due diligence. Like, if you go through that process, if you look into the sources I give you and go into the great detail, then you will actually be able to come to a point where gnosis is everything. Like, this is what the Gnostics said as well, is that salvation in this reality, like escaping the matrix. So we're actually stuck in a matrix. We talk about the physical matrix over here, but we're stuck in a spiritual matrix as well, where these you can say it's kind of a setup to keep our souls trapped in this level of reality, right? So to be able to escape this reality as well as to be able to escape that whole spiritual setup set up by these dark forces, it's all about getting the right knowledge about yourself, about the world, how the world really works, how the universal laws work, and then understanding the knowledge is actually what leads way to salvation, because knowledge is everything, right? Which is why I'm so big on research and actually going and digging deeper into these subjects more, because there's a lot of, you can say, benefits that lie both respect to spiritually as well as human freedom that can be achieved if more and more people actually spend that time and started researching these subjects and came to the right conclusions, because there is truth to be achieved. Okay, it's not like everything is relative. There is absolute truth waiting there. Truth is just that which has happened. That is one thing. Okay, the job is to align our perception with that. Okay, so the more work you put into your perception and to be able to dig into the stuff, the closer and closer we get to truth as a species, and the closer and closer we do that and we get to truth, the more freedom and rights we are able to preserve as a species as a whole.
If this is just a holographic mirage, then what is reality? How do we know what reality is?
So I would say it's not a mirage necessarily. This is the kind of disagreement I have with Hindu traditions and how they define moksha and like Maya as well. Like they think everything's an illusion, because I mean, it's just one way to look at it, right? So if you look at it this way, this reality is real, and this is another thing to understand spiritually. Which is what a lot of new age cults and spiritual gurus proclaim, that all this is Maya. Because I've had deep experiences with the new age movement as well. Like when I say new age movement, I mean like Sadhguru, Shri Ravi Shankar, who have this false perception of spirituality that they really dupe people into believing. So people don't really understand what real spirituality is all about. I'm going to do more content on this again. Something I've touched on in some videos in the past, especially that 4-hour video I did where I really went off on a rant. Like I did touch on all these subjects that way. But I have had close experience because my family, someone from my family was like a hardcore new ager that way. So I saw these beliefs up front, and these beliefs are typically like this. Like you're not supposed to look into the negative, you're giving your energy to them, you're supposed to think positive thoughts, and you're supposed to like focus on self upliftment and really do like self work, just like self help stuff, normal self help stuff, like law of attraction, all of that whole gambit is like the new age belief system, which is something I say like people tend to fall for that once they're really disillusioned with religion or atheism. Like people typically tend to go there. Okay, but it's still like that last step. Like the new age movement also has a lot of truths about, say, spirituality and any other experience phenomena, reincarnation. Like all those things are true, but they don't tell you the whole story, and a lot of their beliefs are very twisted as well. And specifically, like a lot of satanic influence has existed in the new age movement, right? So I was saying this thing is because a lot of new agers do believe that we're not supposed to put our you can say energy into pursuing these negative subjects, but that's exactly like the truth is exactly opposite to that, is because only once we investigate the negative are we investigating the truth. Like nothing is positive or negative. Like if a child is being sacrificed, or there's a global totalitarian prison state that's being built in front of us, like that you might perceive that to be negative. But what would be more negative in that situation is your ignorance actually keeping the thing going. If people actually investigated that and then use real spirituality to shine light on the darkness, that's what real spirituality is all about. It's not about ignoring the negative or ignoring the truth, right? It's about investigating that in detail and then figuring out solutions. Like, okay, this is the current state. how do we as a spiritual species advance to the point where we eradicate that thing, because we have an obligation to do that. We don't want evil to exist in the world. We don't want slavery to exist. We want to be able to remove that. So the other kind of pitfalls I saw in the new age belief system as well, and again, like just I went on off a tangent, like why did we start talking about this, like why was I speaking about the new age movement again?
I completely forgot. I was asking, yeah, see, I started with, I said the word mirage, and that kind of triggered this
Okay,
conversation.
I'll get to that. So yeah, this is another, like I was just explaining the false beliefs of the new age system, and this whole idea about Maya is that, okay, like when it comes to say spiritual subjects, like people believe that this world is just illusory, and we're not supposed to say take this seriously, and we're supposed to focus on our spirit. And then you have like false dialectics, like these are like mind programs. Okay, you have like one extreme and the other extreme, and the truth is like in the middle. But because people get sucked into like these two things, they really can't tend to get to that middle point where the truth of the matter really lies. So again, like even with this phenomena, you have that whole same thing. Like you can say highly religious people believe that spirit is supreme and matter is kind of illusory, and even new age people believe that. And then you have your atheist materialists. They believe that this is supreme and that's absolute, like non-existent, that doesn't exist at all. But the real middle ground is understanding that this is as spiritual a plane as what happens after you die. This is just another level of experience. It's not a total illusion. Like this exists. Okay, like freedom is going out here, rights are going out here, these things matter, we have an obligation to intervene and to stop that.
Exactly.
So that's, yeah, so I mean this is real, like this is a real reality. What I am saying is that there's different states to how this reality really exists. Like we're experiencing in this form this way right now, and it's because we can we have this body is because we are able to experience it in this way at the back of our head. Like this reality is not there right now as you perceive it. It's a way your brain, your physical process has decoded that, and this is an experience that the creative consciousness wanted you to have. So you could not just have like this state of, you can say, not experiencing holographic like 3D reality. You could actually get immersive in the experience and be able to gain insight from that. Okay, so this is just different levels of existence. Like you have this out here, even once you leave this body and go into another reality, life is still 3D. Okay, it's only when you merge with that infinite field that like you're just a state of potential and consciousness. But as far as you are like an individual fragmented soul experiencing different realities, you will always have a lens through which like you'll be seeing, and things will be like physical. Of course it will be less denser than this reality, and it will be much more easier to create in those more expanded states. Like you will be able to manifest much more easily just with thought and intention and stuff. But out here this reality is more dense because we're living in this trap that's set up by these entities where they lowered our consciousness down and they brought us into the low vibrational states. Because if you study ancient sources about how humans really used to be before this whole intervention of this like extraterrestrial force happened, people could telepathically communicate much more easier. Like our psychic abilities were highly, you can say, heightened, and we lived in much higher states of consciousness that way. Like we aren't stuck in these kind of loops that we're in right now, and traumas and all the stuff that people go through life and the suffering and everything. Like those states were much more expanded, but reality was still holographic. It's just that people knew this is an experience, and this ends, like this level of experience ends once you end here. So there's no fear of death, and there's no fear at all, because you understand like what life is, what truth is, which is why you could dedicate to serve the truth, because you are more connected with that state that, okay, I'm a field of consciousness and potential, and this is my experience. So I'm not really going to get trapped by the fear of death or the fear of what other people are going to say about me, or the fear of losing my job or my credibility or whatever. Like you just focus more on pursuing the truth. But it's because we're stuck in such dense mind traps out here, is because like people are totally paralyzed by fear. Like even a lot of people who come to this information right now, they get very very paralyzed. Like they can't think of doing the right thing because they're always thinking about consequences. Like I'll lose my life, I'll lose my job, I'll lose this, I'll lose that. But people don't understand, like once you start serving love and once you start serving truth, the universe of the creator, and if you do that and you stand up for natural law and you really like propagate the right knowledge of the occult and like how these dynamics work, like forces will come to take care of you, because you're not just living life for an individual purpose. Okay, you're not just like serving yourself or have materialistic visions that way of like having a bigger house. Of course, like there's nothing wrong in having that, it's just about context. But if you're serving higher forces and higher truths, like those things do step into like kind of take care of you as well, which is what helps to get rid of that fear. You just have to submit to the field, and then that takes care of you and helps to make things happen in your life very synchronistically. Like I can speak from my own personal experiences as well, because ever since I started this path, it's been like things have just been unfolding one after the other. And it's like, I mean, there's so much stuff I'm doing now that would have felt like a dream to me, so many years back. But because you just kept going, it's like one door after the other keeps opening up, and you meet people who you like, such crazy experiences that I've had that aren't aren't explainable like just with normal logic or reason. There's much more going on to life than we like perceive that way.
Yeah, why did you start with this path?
I mean, I've explained the story before. I think we spoke about the last time as well. Like I went through a spiritual kind of existential crisis, and really started contemplating these things on a deeper level. Like until then, I was just stuck in these mainstream mind traps and the bubble, the programming bubble. But then there's a painful event in my life of splitting with a partner that actually made me really want to figure out like what's going on. Because until then, my perspective had been very narrow. Like I just thought like, okay, life is 3 square years and 10, and you live to 80, and you have a family, and you have a job, and mainstream stuff, that way, like go for a vacation, whatever. But I'm glad that experience happened, kind of, because it's pain that teaches you so much. And actually, every bad experience I've had in my life, it's been very, very fruitful in terms of like there's always a gift waiting at the end of that bad traumatic experience that you're going through. And life gives you these experiences so that you can get on the right track. Okay, and people who don't go on the right track, they get stuck deeper and deeper and deeper into this. Like I could have gone into, like, can say, addiction. I could have gone into I've been hurt, I pass it on to others. This is what people tend to do all the time. That way, they don't learn from the experience. They just like get hurt, and their soul kind of gets fractured somewhere, and then you tend to just pass this on to society. This is why the elite as well, like a lot of the people who are behind this agenda, they've been put through torture in their childhood, they've been through mind control, they've been through satanic ritual abuse, like not killed, but like been through bad stuff that way. So they tend to pass on that trauma to society overall. I'm not justifying their actions or saying, I'm just saying it's a point of understanding like why so many of them do what they do, because they've been put through trauma and psychological abuse as well. And it's the same thing for us. So that experience of me, I mean, made me take the right path. Okay, take that pain, process it, and then use it to expand, get closer to truth, and actually get deeper into figuring out, okay, like what's really going on out here. That's how my whole journey started. And then, I mean, I just kept researching. Like first it started with more spiritual subjects, and then I kind of got into conspiracies, knee deep into conspiracies, and just figured out like there's so much stuff that we've been told is not true, and almost everything's a lie that way. And then like that whole process started. Like once I saw, I think, David Icke's lecture, that really motivated me to take action, because I was in college, and that time like people were just on their own paths, totally oblivious to any of this information, just pursuing the traditional career paths. And I was like, okay, the great reset is going to happen, new world order is going to happen, there's going to be world government, there's going to be microchipping, our rights are going to go, there's going to be lockdowns and food shortages, and all. I knew all this stuff back then in detail, because people had figured it out since many years. People are getting to know about this stuff now. But if you read other authors, like they'll tell you in great detail. Like it's almost like foretelling the future in great detail. If you read Ike, if you read like any of the other, like Passio, any of these people, if you study them that way, and others as well, like even before Ike, there have been some people who kind of understood the new world order. In fact, many of the globalists have written in their own books with respect to the kind of world they want to create. So I came to know about all this stuff in college, and I was like, okay, if this is true and this is going to happen, like, is pursuing my traditional career path going to help me? And I was like, no, because by the time I pass out, or by the time I do this, like this timeline is so close, because they want to bring this up by 2030. I knew that as well, right? So I was like, by the time I do this, like all this stuff is going to come in. By the time I pass out, like maybe my job will just go because I get automated, or maybe they bring in the great reset and I'll become a serf, and my skills won't be worth of any value. Like you can see this right now, right? Like so many knowledge bases and skill sets and what people are pursuing their lives to do are becoming obsolete very fast, because of how the world is changing and how the landscape is changing. And I saw that stuff back then, which is why I was like, this degree and like pursuing my finance path is a waste of time. And that's what really motivated me to come into this. And then I got deeper and deeper into it. The more I researched, the more insights I had. And then I came across Mark Passio's work, and that was like one of the best things, because that really like pumped me up to take hardcore action and understand my responsibility as a creative consciousness out here, and to be able to actually, you can say, do the work, and to be able to move us closer to freedom. Like that was my whole vision. I understood like we can do that, we have the power. This is not all a lost cause. The reason it seems like a lost cause is because people aren't doing what's necessary. If people do what's necessary, then like we will be able to end these things.
Yeah. I find one thing very interesting what you said, and I want to reflect on that. You started a few years ago, and a lot of your predictions, David Icke's predictions, the predictions of conspiracy researchers have come true. Okay, lockdowns, pandemic, microchips. And then we have the skeptics. I used to be an atheist myself. Okay, I was in the atheist camp. I was a rationalist. Still, I'm a rationalist, but the atheism part, I've taken it out. And if I would have met you a few years ago, I would have dismissed a lot of what you were saying. But looking at things, looking at how things have happened, I should obviously change my mind. I should obviously say, hey, you know what? A lot of things that Yohan has said, a lot of things that David Icke has said, has come true. I have to value what they're saying. But along with me, there were a bunch of other atheists too. Okay, they didn't respond the way I'm responding. They're shifting their goalposts. They are also seeing what has happened. They have also seen that lockdowns have happened, microchipping is happening now, but they're still choosing to be skeptical. I don't know why. I don't understand why they're choosing to be skeptical this way.
I have a lot of insights on this to share, man, because I've studied the skeptic movement very closely. And the thing I would say is that a lot of the logical fallacies that these people tend to rail against, they employ themselves. Like if you watch my video I did on Dhruv Rathi and how he tend to debunk conspiracies and stuff, like I went into that, like the ad hominem laws and like all the things that people do, like you can say cherry picking and many different kind of logical fallacies that they typically tend to say take a piece of content and break it down. Like this guy's having these fallacies. Like if you study the belief system, like they actually like employ a lot of it themselves, and I can suggest you some good literature that will really help to make you make sense of why these people are stuck in the mind traps they're in. I think it's primarily solipsism. Solipsism is a very destructive belief system that really stops humans from progressing towards truth and consciousness. It's because people believe that there's no objective truth, there's no the kind of basis to anything. Everything is subjective, everything is what we make up in our minds. And if you believe that, you will never even start that path. Like you will kind of be disillusioned, and that's kind of one of the biggest destroyers of freedom, is that solipsistic mindset, which is what I do believe that many atheists share as well. And I mean, see, it's just all about this, man. Like if moving goalposts is a fallacy when quacks do it, or homeopaths or whatever, take your flavor of the month, that these people rail against. Like why shouldn't we apply that to you, right? Like if you see I've seen many, like if you see Christopher French, he's like this famous skeptic in UK, and him and Rupert Sheldrake actually had like a lot of back and forth, because Rupert Sheldrake was doing these experiments with dogs and like actually studying how when the neighbor was like, when the owner was coming closer, the dog would actually come and stand at the door before there was any sight of the neighbor around. So they had a back and forth, and this is typically what they tend to come down to, like extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right? So who decides what's extraordinary? If your belief is that this reality is material, then of course, like when people talk about non-human phenomena and all, it might seem extraordinary. It's just like if I was talking a video game and he told me there's this whole life outside, that way, like it would seem extraordinary to me, man. But that's not what the truth is about, right? Like the truth is that this stuff exists. So I always, when it comes to skeptics, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes they make, is that they tend to, and so I was talking to a friend also about, like, I mean, these are all insights I've had, like just going deeper and deeper into this. And very few people are actually doing this. And this is what we really need, is for people to go and put their own mind and to actually be able to have these penny drops and stuff. Is that the biggest problem with skeptics when it comes to analyzing conspiracy? Let's keep spirituality out and like non-human phenomena and all that out, like, because there's other things to address over there, which you can probably do another time. But at least because you're talking about conspiracy and things are coming true, but yet they're not accepting it, right? It's because they have a very, you can say, hardline approach when it comes to like how we evaluate things in the scientific world, like how we evaluate the biological sciences or physics, or like phenomena like that. They kind of extrapolate that thinking into motives and intentions. Okay. But people have to understand that you cannot apply the hard scientific or purely rational thinking when it comes to motives, intentions, when it comes to secret cover-ups, because they're trying to hide that stuff. It's like if I had a bad intention, like let's say me, and I tended to collude with like some people and do a certain bad thing to you, that's all a conspiracy is. Right? So why is every conspiracy a conspiracy theory? Like there, you can have conspiracy facts and we're drowning in them today, like we can see. Right? So just because you don't have that direct level of evidence, like this person came out and said this, and it's kind of like circumstantial evidence becomes important when trying to like evaluate conspiracies, right? Because it's the circumstances that really gives credence to something, which is why earlier I was also saying that we shouldn't just dismiss circumstantial evidence altogether. And even circumstantial evidence has a kind of weight and levels to it. It's not all circumstantial evidence is the same. And this is the biggest problem with the skeptics, is that they tend to dismiss all anecdotes, all circumstantial evidence. All of that doesn't matter. Like, you just need this direct thing about for a conspiracy to be proved. And that's really not the way to go about it, because it's like a police officer. If you want to nab a criminal, you can't start out with just like wanting direct evidence. You have to have suspects, you have to have a lot of circumstantial evidence, and then of course, like, you need to confirm that, right? So this is the same thing when people, like, it's coming from so many different sources. There's so much triangulation. How is it possible that people have described something in great detail about exactly how the world is going to be 30 years back, and this exact same thing is happening now? Like, what are the chances, man? Like, it can't be coincidence. So definitely they're tapping into something, or they know about an agenda, or they're seeing the future. It's like two possibilities there. When you see the detail to which you have to read it for yourself to understand like what level of detail to which people have written about and what's exactly going on right now. It's like a fairy tale. Like, I mean, exactly the same things have been happening. And I read books from 95 and I was mind blown that they were talking about, in fact, David Icke's book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free. That's a book from 95. And he was talking about, I remember reading that in France when I was on a trip there. And like, I was in my hotel room and I was reading all about like microchipping and, this entire, you can say, this secret society nexus that exists from the Round Table Network, like Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission, and how the World Economic Forum and World Bank, IMF, like how all these people were like enslaving countries and pushing all these agendas. And they wanted world government, they wanted a cashless society, they wanted a single electronic digital currency, they wanted like this hive mind that will take control of our minds. This is all there in great detail many years back, like one world military and so many different themes of this whole agenda, right? So how is that possible? And another thing, like, okay, there's that. Then there's admissions from people within the nexus. If you read H.G. Wells, if you read David Rockefeller, if you read Jack Attlee, who was the premier of France at one point, if you read Bertrand Russell, if you read Aldous Huxley, if you read George Orwell, these people describe what the hell is going to happen because they were part of this whole, you can say, network that's wanting to implement this. And they had access to that. You can read Carroll Quigley. He was like one of the mentors to Bill Clinton. And he researched these people's archives and actually wrote the 1,300-page book called Tragedy and Hope, where he described in great detail, like, okay, there's this banking family nexus and they want to take over the world and create world government and create a global financial economic order. And he wasn't trying to expose them. He was like, yeah, this is a good thing. This is just how they're doing it. And I wish they were more open about it and they came out and told the world this is what they want to do. So you can read their own admissions in great detail, man. And then you can, of course, this is the thing I said, this is the biggest trap with the skeptics, is that they don't give weight to circumstantial evidence and doubt. Like, you have to have doubt for certain things. Like, if certain things have happened, like event 201 has happened right before the pandemic, what are the chances, man? Like, when you see lockstep and you see this, it kind of adds up on itself. Triangulation, things from different sources, and you have to ask yourself the question: if this was true, what level of evidence would convince me? Like, does that possible? Anything is possible, right? If this really was, like, people have to ask themselves the question, like, if this was possible, what level of evidence would convince me? And if the answer is, it's kind of like the control of people also, right? Like, okay, let's Yohan can be legit, it's a possibility. Now, what level of evidence would convince me? If they have an answer, you meet their answer. Okay, first the answer has to be reasonable, of course, and it's a reasonable answer, and you meet that, they should change their mind. But that's not what we see, right? It's all about, like, when it comes to the skeptics as well as when it comes to the control of, it's all about moving a goalpost. Like, I want to see this. Okay, that's satisfied. Now I want more. Now that's satisfied. I want more. So these are logical fallacies. And if you employ them, then you don't have any basis for debate because you're using the logical fallacies that you are so against.
See, I believe that some level of skepticism is important, but you shouldn't have very
skepticism
little
is very, very important. Skepticism is the most important thing, I would say. But what these skeptics, these so-called quote unquote skeptics do, is they mix up skepticism with cynicism. Okay, there's a difference in the mind states. Like, you're not supposed to be a gullible person in your mind who believes anything anyone tells you. You're not supposed to have a strong cynical dismissive attitude as well. You're supposed to be open to the idea. Okay, like just like atheism, man. Like, you're supposed to be open to the idea that non-human phenomena exist. And then you let the evidence come in, and then you see if that evidence convinces you or not. But if you're shut off and you bloody hell believe that this whole thing is just physical and it can't even exist, like, how are you even going to get convinced? If you're not open to that possibility also.
See, with regards to skepticism, I think there has to be a balance. Now, I may not agree with everything that you said with the whole reptilian thing. I'm not sure. I don't know.
But
Okay.
that's why I told you, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to do that, which is why this is exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Don't
Wait.
listen to what I'm
Wait.
saying.
Yeah.
Actually go and start your path and investigate the subjects I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Be open to them, then come to your own truth. That's what I want everyone to do. In fact, I told you in the beginning that I see this culture where people just listen to people and like start regurgitating.
Yeah.
Even me, like don't do that with me. Don't watch my video and just like Yohan said this, so it's true. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I'm asking every single person to start your path of truth discovery. Get into these subjects, put the time and effort in, and then figure things out by yourself. That's how we will change the world.
So what I was saying was, with some extraordinary claims like reptilians and stuff, I can be a little skeptical. But some of the things that you say, it is obvious. Like, for example, vaccines. With vaccines, especially COVID vaccines, the evidence is so obvious that I cannot be skeptical there. Okay, now I was having a conversation with an atheist skeptical whose YouTube channel is doing very well now. Pranav Radhakrishnan, his Science is Dope channel is doing very well now. I put up some stories on my Instagram and he's like, "Hey bro, are you an anti-vaxxer?" And we had a long conversation on that, and he's like, no, you're putting these stories that are anti-vax. I said, look, I have nothing against vaccines. Maybe some vaccines do work, but I'm not going to take this COVID vaccine because there are side effects. And he said, well, they're safe and effective. I said, no, they're not safe, they're not effective. And then he said, look, people have died from COVID. Has anyone died from the vaccine? So I sent him links of people who actually died from the vaccine. Then he's like, no, that's 1 in a million. So the goalpost keeps shifting, and he's even made a video recently called "Why Vaccinating Should Not Be a Personal Choice." And
I've seen that. I've seen his content, dude. I've seen it. I might address it at some point in the future. I don't have time for it right now.
It's fucking absurd, okay? Because the evidence against his argument is so strong that he's not addressing that part at all. He's already concluded that, hey, anybody who disagrees with me is an anti-vaxxer. The thing is, the same thing has happened to him. Okay, people don't address what he's saying, and even before listening to Pranav, they tell, "Oh, you're anti-Hindu, you're anti-national," and he's addressed that. He's like, "You can't call me anti-Hindu, anti-national without listening to me." And that's exactly how he behaves. He doesn't look at the criticism of COVID vaccine. He doesn't look at the fact that people have died. He doesn't look at the fact that this disease doesn't really need a vaccine because it has 99.9% survival rate. He doesn't look at any of that, and just, he has concluded that, hey, you disagree with me, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a conspiracy theorist, blah blah blah.
But isn't that what I was telling you earlier? Is that a lot of the logical fallacies that they tend to rail against are stuff they employ. They just don't see the hypocrisy because no one tells them that, because no one's that adept to actually get into this and to be able to have that kind of conversation with them. Because most people are stuck in mind traps. Like, most people are coming from this from a religious perspective or from a new age perspective. So like, who's going to address them? Like, the people who are actually critically thinking about this stuff and like highlighting double standards are very, very few. So we have to do it. Like, no one else is going to do it.
That's why I even told him, look, I'm not some crazy anti-vax conspiracy theorist. I'm a rationalist. The guy who told me that you don't need the COVID vaccine was Dr. Srinivas Takilaya, who you had on your podcast as well, who's also a rationalist and an atheist. So he has more in common with Pranav than with us. So I don't understand. I don't understand why he believes that everybody who criticizes the vaccine belongs to this camp. And I think only people like us can actually criticize Pranav, like you said. It has to be a critical thinker. It has to be a rationalist. But I want to get into another question. Are you like a complete anti-vaxxer, or are you like, okay, COVID vaccines are bad, but then there are some other vaccines like rabies vaccine or the tetanus shot. That's okay.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, man. So if you see rabies, right, like a lot of the vaccines are given, they're actually given, you can say, after you get the infection. Like, and they're not really vaccines, they're actually antibodies. Okay, like that's something about rabies people don't know. I got to know about that after I interviewed Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. Right. So, I mean, I'll just put it this way, dude. Like, I believe in the immune system. I understand how different kinds of white blood cells work, like, T helper, T suppressor, T regulatory, white blood cells, B cells, neutrophils. It's very, very complex. Okay. And immunology is a genuine field where a lot of people have much more knowledge than I do. And understanding that, like, I do understand the concept that if you give your immune system exposure to an antigen from like a part of the microbe, whatever you're looking for, If they're exposed to it, they come across the agent, they're gonna have a better immune response. Okay, like that's fact. No one's denying that. But the issue with vaccines is that the researchers don't put critical thinking enough. Okay, like the trials are not really structured in a way which would satisfy me from a safety perspective. Like, okay, let's just say this. Okay, your theory is, and the theory is totally valid, right? Like if you put a tiny kind of part of an antigen into your body, and then like you contract the agent again, then you will be better off to deal with it. Okay, are there other ways of doing that? Okay, like can I get like contracted with the agent, and then my host factors are so good that I don't need a vaccine, right? Like see, vaccines are all about making you prepared for an agent when the agent comes. Now there are other ways of doing that. Like so, we see, just take COVID for an example. And like we know that if you get SARS-CoV-2, if you have optimum vitamin D levels, if they're above 20 or 25, if you have like insulin resistance, if you have adequate levels of selenium, if you have adequate levels of zinc, like in the blood, you will be fine fighting it, right? If you don't have chronic inflammation, if you don't have kind of gut microbiome imbalances, like all these things will make sure you contract it, and you can say a mucosal immune system, everything will just kick in. You might probably not even have to go to the adaptive arm, like the innate immune system will just do it, like your neutrophils and natural killer cells and all that will just do it for you. You won't even have to go to the point of developing memory because the immune system is so robust. So why is no one talking about that as a vaccine? Like why is a vaccine just seen as, okay, a very very specific thing, like just specific to the antigen? So that's an arbitrary goalpost that they themselves make, right? Like, no, immunity can only be achieved if I can give you exactly the same kind of thing and then you contract it in specific. No, but there are other host factors that I can do and take up, like upgrade my health, which make sure that if I come into contact with the agent, I will utilize it and I will not pass it on. Right. So why aren't we talking about vaccines from a broader perspective? That's my perspective on vaccines. Like I see that as one tool. Okay, like it's like multiple ways, like vitamin D is one way to reduce your odds of contracting a severe infection. Like selenium is another variable. Vaccines are just one variable in that whole gambit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
For any infectious disease, right?
I
So why do
agree
we
with
just
that.
like talk about that one thing as if it's the only variable and it's the only legit variable, when there's so much science available on other like host factors and variables which can help you do the exact same thing, reduce transmission, reduce symptom severity, all of that. I think that's my perspective. But even going into the topic, even talking about that one vaccine variable, okay, I believe the studies that have been done till now are fraudulent, and I'll tell you why. It's because I've mentioned this before, I think, but they don't use genuine placebos. Okay, this is the reason why we came up with placebo controlled trials in science, because we wanted to like really tease out causality and not account for the belief system over there as well, right? So if you're going to use in your control arm, you're going to use another vaccine and that has its own adverse event profile, and then you don't have any statistically significant increase in this group versus this group, you can claim your trial to be a success if you want to, but you're fooling the public, because you're not really using a saline injection over there, right? So that's the biggest problem with safety. Like if you don't really have genuine placebos, if the time span of the study is not proper, if the adverse events are being suppressed, you can find so many papers on adverse events being suppressed because the fucking drug companies are doing the research themselves, man. So there's so much, like Pfizer data just came out for the phase 3 trials with respect to what kind of conspiracy and cover up went on over there. So these are all these factors. I'm not convinced about the safety and even the efficacy, right? Like we all know about antibody dependent enhancement. We know that it's not as simple. If you just have antibodies, you will protect yourself. There's so many different components of the immune system involved. Your antibodies, okay, let's say that I know about how antibody complexes develop as well, because I'm deep into functional medicine. I use complex antibody testing for heavy metals, like where we actually look for antibodies to metals that bind to human tissue antigens. Okay, and then we look for like immune activity against that. Okay, so why do we assume that the antibody that's being developed when you inject yourself with that part of the antigen is exactly specific to that, and that's going to give you protection against the whole thing? Because you're not just injecting the antigen, you're putting it with a bunch of other stuff. Like, how do you know immune system not reacting to that whole thing and it's just reacting to that tiny thing? So these are all kind of, and you're injecting right into the bloodstream, where the absorption is the highest. Your macrophages come in, they gobble up the toxins, they take it right to the blood-brain barrier. There's many kind of risks and differences with respect to the theory of that and what actually pans out. And also I did a detailed episode deep dive on autoimmunity and vaccines. If you research some of the best like people in autoimmunity, like Yehuda Schonfeld, he's written I think 1700 papers on autoimmunity. So there is a wide body of literature that talks about how infectious agents actually lead to autoimmunity. Okay, which is why I don't tend to dismiss microbiology and like virus research and all that, because there's a lot of credible scientific evidence available to show that these things do have effects. And in fact, not just short-term acute exposure, but they can go and like get infected in some part of your body and then cause, chronic low-grade effects, like just a silent infection that's going on and like leading to slow-level crippling damage that manifests as a chronic disease 10-20 years down the line. Okay, so this is like a causative theory that many people have proposed for how infectious diseases actually lead to chronic diseases later on. Right? So there's a lot of kind of you can say detailed research available on this, but I'm saying even the researchers who write about this, like Yehuda Schonfeld, he's written many papers on how infectious agents lead to autoimmune disorders later on. But he's also written papers on vaccines, like how vaccine proteins are supposed to be selected very carefully to avoid cross-reactivity. Right, because if you select a portion of that antigen that has cross-reactivity to my tissue, you can actually give me autoimmunity that way, and which is why vaccines have been implicated in autoimmune disorders so much. There are many mechanisms through which that happens, and not all antibodies are a good thing. Like you don't constantly want to keep stimulating your immune system to give you antibodies, right? Like you have memory cells. If you contact it later, you'll be fine. So I think this theme with respect to infectious disease I've always seen is that the threat is always very blown up. You can say the death rate and everything is always very, very exaggerated. And then the vaccine adverse events are highly, highly suppressed because of reasons we've gone into. So it makes it look like the risk benefit thing is much better when it comes to getting a vaccine or contracting the infection. Right?
I agree with you. I agree with you on the whole COVID thing. It's obvious,
I'm not even talking about COVID, bro. I'm just talking about vaccines as a concept, which is why I'm saying that we have to stop seeing that as the only variable for protecting an infectious disease, whether it's anything, whether it's polio, whether it's measles. You can find host factors for every single thing. Like measles does very well with vitamin E supplementation. You can find many papers on that. With respect to viruses, like there are many compounds like lysine, vitamin C given properly. So these things actually improve your antiviral responses that way. So whatever kind of microbe you're looking for, whether it's fungi, whether it's bacteria, like you can have natural interventions where you actually tweak for those factors and you are able to improve your, say, outcome if you do contract the agent. Right. So I'm saying this for all microorganisms, for all vaccines. Vaccines can be helpful provided there's a safe and effective one for which the evidence needs to be generated. In fact, if you research good virologists like Dr. Judy Mikovits, she's a believer in immunology and vaccines, but she talks about this exactly from the same perspective. Like you just don't have to think about a vaccine from that very narrow perspective. You can use cannabinoids, you can use so many different kinds of immune modulatory components that can actually improve your response when you contract an infection. Like, why do you want to just think it's this one needle that you put in your arm and that's the only thing that can protect you? It doesn't work like that. And even if I'm saying, like, if I had to be convinced for that one variable to work, I would need the evidence to be generated. They would have to use placebos in the trials. The follow-up period would have to be long enough. You can't dismiss adverse events like that. You follow the proper causality assessment criteria. We've gone to this in the last episode in great detail, I think. Apply the same problem with the COVID vaccines. I think they exist in many, many different vaccine trials, and they need to be done properly in order for us to be sure that they're safe and they're effective. And another point, in the trials, they almost always looking at the endpoint as just what they're trying to target. They're not looking at other endpoints. Like maybe, okay, I get a vaccine and it reduces my chance of, say, measles. Okay, but what if the vaccine also increase my chance of heart attacks and strokes? If I'm not tracking that, and as an endpoint, I'm only looking at measles mortality or measles, then I will miss out on, okay, maybe it did something good here, but like, what if it did something other than these other endpoints? So if you don't have this kind of, and this has been seen in vaccines, like there's one example of the DTP vaccine. It did work against that, but it increased all-cause mortality later on, right? So these are very, I don't know, you really have to get into this stuff and think about it critically. Like even when it comes to adverse event reporting, what's the mantra of vaccine proponents? Like vaccines are safe and effective, right? So if the adverse event reporting is so messed up, and you see how messed up it is with respect to COVID, right? So when it comes to vaccine adverse events, the criteria is so stringent if you want to associate causality with a specific vaccine, right? Which is how they get able to get away with these narratives, like it's safe and effective and no, it's 1 in a million and all that. But if you actually sit to think about it properly, the whole 1 in a million argument, why is it 1 in a million? Because the adverse event reporting systems are so messed up, and because the double standards are there, like for virus deaths or microbe deaths, like whatever, polio or whatever, you blow it up so much with like very, very bad use of the PCR testing and all the issues we've seen. Apply that to any kind of infectious disease we're talking about. And when it comes to vaccines, you have the most stringent criteria. Like you will try to deny causality as much as possible until you absolutely have to like admit it. And that's also very rare, which is why they are rare. It's not because they're actually rare, it's because how we are assessing post-vaccination deaths or adverse events is flawed. That's the problem.
Okay. So what do you think is the biggest threat for us in this year?
I definitely think the monetary side of things is something people need to focus on, definitely. And I think that the bill that's gonna come, okay, that's definitely gonna be an issue. Like they are coming up with a new bill, health bill, which is, as I said, the draft was written in 2017, and they're actually proposing for, there are no proper consent mechanisms over there. Like they've given powers to people to like force testing and vaccination and stuff, but the consent thing is not really properly defined over there. So they might be able to like get away with mandatory vaccinations because of that clause, right? So this is what I've always told people. Like people are freaking out about this bill right now, and they're kind of thinking, oh, I mean, like, what the hell? Like, this is gonna come. Like, what is AIM doing? What is Yuan doing about this? I just want to tell you all, like this, there are many other bills that are going to keep coming, which are going to be sponsored by the deep state and going to be pushed to the puppet politicians in parliament. Okay. And if you really, really want to solve the problem, understand why this is happening. Like this is happening because we believe in the state, we believe in the parliament, we believe in the judicial system, we believe that these people will pass a bill and then we all have to follow it. And the law enforcement is brainwashed, so they think they have to follow it, right? But none of us have to follow it. You just like have to understand the basics. Go and watch the podcast on anarchy that I did with Pratham, or go and watch my last video on, like, where I spoke about India's way out of the new world order. I went into these dynamics, and I'm going to continue to go into them in greater detail. But the whole problem with authority and the notion that something comes down from parliament and we have to follow it is really, really, I mean, you can say it's very logically fallacious, as well as it's not based on a correct understanding of things. I believe that the only law people should follow is natural law. Don't steal. Don't initiate violence against anyone or their property. That's the compass through which I judge law. Okay, so most constitutionalists would judge the law through the constitution. That's how the democracy is supposed to function. Like parliamentarians can come and pass whatever bill they want in parliament. Okay, but it's because we have a constitution and we have a court system that's supposed to at least check these laws that they're in alignment and then quash the ones which aren't. Okay, which we know how flawed that is to begin with. Okay, so this is the lens through, the constitution is the lens through which the good people who genuinely believe in democracy judge laws, right? So in that context, I would say, if I was a statist and if this law was going to come, what I would say is that, of course, like the way to fight this from a statist perspective is mass protest. We saw how the farmers did it for their bills, right? So that's definitely like not mass protest, non-cooperation. And non-cooperation is more on the anarchist side, but protest and like begging parliamentarians to take this back is that whole process in a democratic setup. And of course, once the law is passed, only then can you approach the courts and want to strike down it on the basis of the constitutionality and how it's violating the fundamental rights in the constitution. So that is something we would definitely do, right? With Awaken India Movement, it's not an anarchist thing, right? Like I'm an anarchist personally, but even though I'm an anarchist, I believe in all approaches. Like I believe in giving it back in protest. I believe in giving it back to the own system in the courts. I believe that we should have politicians who are coming from our perspective, like a libertarian or understanding the new world order, or ideally both, and then putting the influence over there, right? So I do believe in all that, and we will be doing all that. It's just that like it's not even passed yet, right? So of course we have to build awareness towards it, which I will do, and which all of us will do. But you have to understand that's a very statist way of looking at things, and the court system out here is really messed up. This whole thing about the mandate should have been quashed eight even before, without us doing anything or filing a case. Like the judge should have taken it up suo moto and quashed it, right? If we actually had a proper functioning democracy with the court system intact. But we don't have that. There's so much corruption, and there's so many issues in the constitution itself which make these things challenging. The constitution has not given us absolute rights. It's given us rights that are conditional. This is the biggest issue with all the constitutions in the world, is that they don't value our inherent natural rights as an absolute thing. Like they don't see it as these rights are yours and no one can take it from you. That's how you should see the dynamic. Like these rights aren't given by Ambedkar or by people who wrote the American Constitution. They are not the grantors of these rights. They just wrote them down in a book. Rights are a moral concept. It's a reciprocal arrangement between sentient beings where we respect each other's body and property rights. So it's because people don't have this understanding. Okay, they're trying to think that, okay, this law is passed now, we're messed up. And of course that's true, because the law enforcement and everyone else believes that they have to follow this, which is why it's so messed up. The messed up part is not that Modi or BJP came and wrote a bill and they passed it. The messed up part is that everyone believes they have some obligation to obey because they believe democracy is legit. They believe in all these political you can say rituals and mind control tactics about representative democracy, and about how majority has consented and we have voted for these people. The people believe that the constitution and all these things gives this stuff legitimacy, but it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Yeah, even I do obey the laws, not because I respect the government, because I don't want to get thrashed by the cops.
Exactly. That's what I said last time in my own video as well. Like, I just follow it because I don't want violence done to me. I don't think I have some moral obligation to follow that. Right. So this is what I was saying. Like the current legal system is so messed up that we don't have a functioning democracy. Things take a lot of time to work, and by the time a lot of damage does happen, and that's a problem of the status. Okay, like if everyone thought like me, and like we went forward with going towards a stateless society, we wouldn't have to worry about these problems, man. Like people wouldn't believe in authority. We'd all believe in the non-aggression principle and natural law, and we would have courts and dispute resolution organizations that functioned in a competitive environment. We would have our defense provided in a competitive environment. Everything would be voluntary and competitive. So you wouldn't have to worry about the centralization of power and monopoly. And of course, bad things can happen, but it will be much easier to deal with them in that world than in this world, because we are all funding our own enslavement, right? So if people are genuinely interested in stopping this problem, not just thrashing one bill, right? Like they came out with this mandate. We took like 6-8 months of work to quash one mandate.
Yeah.
And you understand how easy it is. Like these people are totally in cahoots with these people. They can just keep coming up with one bill, and then we have to fight like one year to remove every bill. Like how crazy is that?
Yeah.
By the time so much damage already happens, if people really genuinely want a solution, the way out is stop paying taxes, stop using the currency, defund the state, shrink the state, eliminate the state, so these people don't have any power. Convince the law enforcement that they don't have to follow these people, follow natural law, use natural law as your constitution. Okay, like how in this setup we judge the law based on the constitution. The constitution has issues because the rights aren't absolute. They are subject to change. They're subject to an emergency. They're subject to these vague concepts of public health and the whole concept of public and society's rights. All these are like logically fallacious concepts. So don't see your constitution as your barometer of end all be all. And the judges are also seeing the constitution. I mean, this is what happened when we went to the court as well. Like the judge was saying, right, like you have your fundamental rights, but then you don't have a right to kind of like society has its rights as well. Like the public at large, the greater good has its rights. These are all logically fallacious things that should have never been in the constitution. The constitution should have had these are your rights. No one can take it, no matter. And even the reason they couldn't put that in the constitution is because if these rights were absolute, the state wouldn't have been able to be created, because the state would have to take taxes. So if we actually had true inherent right to self-ownership and property, no one could steal our property in the way of taxes, right? So this is the reason why the constitutions are the way they are. And this is the whole problem with the whole concept of a constitution and the creation of a state, is that because the state has to exist, the state cannot exist to protect your rights. The state was created by violating your right and taking your money forcefully, right? So how are we expecting to solve it by appealing to the constitution? Of course, like these are all, you can say these are steps we can take to try to reduce the damage. But if people really want to get rid of this problem, people have to understand natural law, people have to understand anarchy, people have to understand their own personal self-responsibility in what they're doing when they're buying from a certain place or using the state's currency or paying taxes, how that is contributing to their own enslavement. And the way out of that is for us to exit that system and go towards a voluntary society. That's how we will end these problems.
Yeah, man, that was a lot to take in. Thank you, man. Thanks for being on the Labyrinth again.
Thanks a lot, man. Really insightful stuff. I enjoyed doing this with you. Next time we probably have more fun, man. Like get me questions where we can like mess around a little bit. This got too intense, dude. But I'm glad it came out this way.
Yeah.